Hi guys and welcome to Quiet Voice podcast channel. Tonight we step into Boston's longest winter night, 1888, where candlelight leans sideways in the draft and the wind prowls like something with patience. What would you do if the city outside your window began to vanish street by street until the familiar world became a white and breathing wall? The glass is cold beneath your fingertips. The lamps tremble, or somewhere beyond the brick houses, a horse stamps nervously against the cobbles, and a church bell sounds dull, as though wrapped in wool. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And while the snow begins to gather, leave a comment with your location and your local time, because somewhere tonight, someone else is also listening in the dark. Now, dim the lights, and imagine yourself in Boston on a March evening that does not yet understand it is becoming history. You're standing near a window in a narrow Boston room, watching the last grey light weaken as seemed above the rooftops, and the day has not seemed especially dramatic at first, which is often how weather prefers to behave. It arrives politely, removes its gloves, and then overturns the furniture when nobody is paying attention. Outside, the air has the damp bite of late winter. Not clean enough for December, not forgiving enough for spring. Boston knows this season well. The city has carried slush in its gutters, soot on its snowbanks, and wet wool on every respectable shoulder. You press your hand against the window frame and feel the wood breathing cold through its seams. The room smells of tallow, coal smoke, boiled potatoes, and the faint sourness of drying boots. A candle burns near the table, its flame stretching whenever the wind finds a hidden crack. The wallpaper seems darker in this weather, as if even the roses printed upon it are reconsidering their life choices. In the grate, coal shifts with a soft orange click, then settles under a skin of ash. Beyond the glass, a few pedestrians move quickly along the street, hunched beneath hats and shawls. Their outlines are blurred by fine snow that has begun to slant across the air. At this hour, Boston is usually full of small, purposeful noises. Wheels roll, hooves strike, doors open, men clear their throats outside shops, women call children inside before supper cools. Yet tonight those sounds seem strangely absorbed, pressed down by a gathering whiteness. The snow does not fall straight. You notice that first. It is not the gentle drifting of a postcard winter, that suspicious little liar, sold by people who live near fireplaces. It comes instead in hard, restless grains, tapping the window as if asking to be admitted. The wind carries it around corners and into alleys, where it spins briefly like torn lace. You watch the nearest gas lamp flicker through the growing curtain, a yellow blur in a world losing its edges. In 1888, Boston is already an old American city with a young industrial appetite. Its streets remember colonial footsteps, but its shops, depots, banks, and newspapers are modern in their ambitions. Telegraph wires stitch buildings together overhead. Railroads connect the city to towns and markets beyond it. Horse-drawn streetcars carry clerks, teachers, shopgirls, and weary labourers through routes that seem dependable enough until nature develops an opinion. People trust schedules more than they should. People always do. A carriage passes slowly, wheels grinding through wet snow that thickens by the minute. The driver has wrapped a scarf around his lower face, leaving only his eyes visible beneath a dark brim. The horse lowers its head against the wind, mane whipping, breath steaming in pale bursts. You hear the leather harness creak. You hear the driver mutter something private and unkind toward the sky. The horse, being wise, offers no disagreement. In the distance, perhaps towards Tremont Street or beyond toward the busier veins of the city. Another bell rings. Its sound arrives unevenly, torn by gusts. You imagine shops being closed a little earlier than usual. bolts sliding into place, shutters pulled across windows. A grocer stacks crates nearer the door. A woman gathers parcels against her chest. A boy selling papers protects his bundle under his coat, because wet news is barely news at all. The great blizzards that struck the northeastern United States in March 1888 became one of the most famous storms in American memory. It paralyzed cities, buried rail lines, stopped telegraph communication, and turned familiar streets into dangerous white corridors. Boston was not alone in its suffering. Yet Boston had its own particular intimacy with the storm. Its narrow lanes, crowded housing, harbour winds, and dependence on daily deliveries all made winter feel personal. The city did not simply receive the weather, it had to negotiate with it, badly, like a tired landlord. You turn from the window and listen to the room behind you. A kettle murmurs, a chair creaks as someone shifts near the fire. The floorboards hold the old chill of the house. Even through your stockings, somewhere above, a neighbour walks with careful steps, each one sounding through the ceiling like a small decision. The house is built of routines. It knows when meals happen, when water is carried, when lamps are lit, when children are told to hush because adults are thinking. Tonight, those routines feel thinner. On the table lies a newspaper, folded beside a chipped cup. Its pages still hold the smell of ink, damp paper, and the city itself. Forecasting in this era is improving, but it is not yet the confident chorus of modern maps and urgent warnings. The United States Weather Bureau will not exist under that name until later. In 1888, weather observation is still tied to government signal services, telegraph reports, barometers, local experience, and the practiced suspicion of people who have watched too many skies. Some warnings may travel, but storms do not always wait for official permission. Historians still debate how fully ordinary residents understood the danger as the blizzard began to form. Some accounts suggest people were caught deeply unprepared, trusting that March snow would remain merely unpleasant. Others argue that many Bostonians recognized the signs and prepared as best they could within the limits of money, fuel, and crowded city life. Both ideas can be true in a storm. One household may have extra coal, another may have one candle and optimism, which is not famous for heating rooms. The wind pushes against the window again, and the flame bends low. For a moment, everything listens. You imagine the storm gathering strength far beyond your street, drawing moisture from the Atlantic and cold from the interior. You do not need to understand the entire machinery of weather to feel its arrival. Your body knows enough. The air presses heavier. The corners of the room sharpen. The glass grows cloudy from your breath as you lean closer, trying to see whether the neighbour across the way has closed her curtains. She has, mostly. A strip of light remains, golden and thin. Across Boston, other windows glow in similar strips. Each one holds a private world, a table, a stove, a bedstead, a basin, a hand reaching for a match. The city is made of thousands of these small lights, fragile and stubborn, in back bay parlours. Lamps shine against polished wood and thick curtains. In South Boston rooms, families crowd near coal stoves while wind moves beneath doors. In North End tenements, cooking smells mingle with damp clothing, tobacco smoke, and too many bodies sharing too little warmth. The storm does not erase class, it reveals it, softly at first. Then with cold precision, you hear sleet scratch at the pane, mix with snow now, a sharper sound. The weather cannot seem to settle on one form of inconvenience, which feels very Boston of it. A draught slides along your ankle, cold as a wet ribbon. You tuck your feet closer beneath the chair and draw your shawl tighter. The fabric smells faintly of soap, smoke, and last winter. Everything in the room seems to hold memory, even the wool. There is a small comfort in preparing without panic. Someone trims the candle wick so that it will burn more evenly. Someone checks the coal scuttle. Someone sets bread beneath a cloth and moves the water pail away from the coldest wall. These are not heroic gestures in the grand old style. No trumpets announce them, yet survival often begins with such mild domestic fussing. Put the kettle nearer, close the latch properly, find the matches before darkness becomes dramatic. Outside more. The last street traffic grows uneven. A streetcar may still be attempting its route. Dragged by horses along rails already filling with snow, the iron tracks, so useful in ordinary weather, become sly when packed with ice. Conductors and drivers will soon find themselves fighting drifts higher than wheels, while passengers wonder exactly how committed they are to reaching home. A city built around movement begins to slow in stages, like a clock losing confidence. You picture a clerk hurrying from an office, collar up, ledger under his coat. He has delayed too long, perhaps because the day's accounts mattered, or because leaving early felt indulgent. Now he steps into the wind that snatches the breath from his mouth. Snow finds the gap between his glove and sleeve with almost artistic cruelty. He tells himself the walk is manageable. People tell themselves many things in bad weather. It is one of our less useful talents. A woman carrying wrapped meat from the butcher pauses at a corner, judging the crossing. Her skirt is already heavy at the hem. She hears wheels approach but sees only a vague shape, dark within white. The driver calls out, and she steps back, heart quickening. Then the carriage lumbers past, leaving slush and horse smell behind. She waits, breath tight, then crosses carefully. Every ordinary errand is becoming a small expedition. The storm has not yet reached its fullest fury, and that is part of its unease. You can feel the city still trying to continue. Doors open, footsteps hurry, a shop bell gives one last bright ring. Somewhere, a family argues about whether someone should fetch more coal somewhere else. A man insists it will blow over by morning, because men have been saying incorrect things near windows since windows were invented. A quirky little detail lingers in accounts of old snowstorms. People sometimes measure drifts not only with rulers, but against familiar objects, stoops, fences, carriage wheels, even the shoulders of unlucky horses. Exact depths varied wildly because wind sculpted snow into absurd shapes. One doorway might be clear enough to open, another might be sealed like a tomb made by a very fussy baker. This made every report sound partly scientific and partly like neighbourhood gossip. 6 feet near the alley, 3 near the pump, and higher than old Mr. Whittaker's temper by the church steps. You smile faintly at that thought, but the smile fades as the wind rises. The house gives a small groan. It is not danger yet. Not exactly. It is more like the city clearing its throat in the dark. You move nearer the candle and watch wax gather in a soft rim around the flame. Candlelight makes time feel older. It softens the table edge, warms the cup, and turns the window into a black mirror. In that reflection, you see your own face mixed with the storm outside. You're both indoors and not entirely safe from the weather. Nobody ever is, not completely. Boston's buildings stand close together, but closeness is not the same as comfort. Brick can hold cold, stone can radiate damp. A room may look snug while every wall quietly steals heat. People know how to fight back with carpets and curtains, shutters, door snakes, layered clothes, and the ancient method of sitting nearer the fire while pretending not to compete for the best chair. Children learn early which floorboards are coldest. Adults learn which bills can wait and which cannot. You hear the kettle begin to sing more clearly, thin and high against the wind. The sound is oddly reassuring. It says that water still boils, tea can still be made, and the household has not surrendered. You pour carefully, letting steam rise into your face. It smells metallic from the kettle, earthy from the tea, and faintly smoky from the room. The cup warms your palms. Outside, snow thickens into a constant rushing hiss. A passer-by appears briefly beneath the gas lamp, then vanishes behind glowing white. For a heartbeat, the figure seems almost unreal, like a shadow trying to remember its body. You wonder who they are. A servant sent on an errand too late, a doctor answering a call, a labourer returning from the waterfront, a widow carrying medicine. The storm makes every stranger more mysterious and perhaps more precious, because each moving shape is proof that the city still contains life. You listen for the familiar city, but it is changing. The snow absorbs the sharpness of wheels, the wind drowns the lighter sounds, even voices become strange. Pulled thin and thrown upward, it is as if Boston is being tucked under a thick white quilt by someone with no sense of mercy. Sleep would be pleasant. Of course, if the quilt were not also blocking doors and burying railroads. The candle trembles again. You breathe slowly. You understand now that this evening is not merely weather passing through. It is a threshold. On one side stands ordinary Boston, impatient, crowded, practical, proud. On the other stands a city humbled into stillness, where candles become stars, neighbours become maps, and every warm room feels like a small island. The snow continues its soft assault upon the window. Grain by grain, insistently, almost tenderly, the wind moves through the street with a low animal voice. You draw the curtain most of the way closed, leaving only a narrow view of the lamp outside. The flame within the room steadies, the coal settles, the tea cools slowly between your hands. You are awake inside the hush before the full storm, listening as Boston's longest winter night gathers itself around you, patient and white and very nearly alive. You step into the street with your collar raised and your breath tucked low in your chest. The door closes behind you with a wooden thud, and the sound vanishes almost at once. Snow rushes across the pavement in pale streams, sliding over cobbles, steps, and iron grates. The city has not disappeared completely, not yet, but it is losing its outlines with remarkable dedication. The first thing you feel is the wind against your face. It is not merely cold, it has texture. It feels rough, grainy, and strangely alive, as if the air has grown tiny teeth. Snow strikes your cheeks and melts there, then freezes into a sting along your skin. Your eyes recede, your lashes collect white flecks. Each breath tastes of iron, smoke, and winter dust. The second thing you notice is the silence beneath the noise. The wind is loud, of course. It winds through narrow lanes and rattles loose signs against shop fronts. It shakes shutters and drags snow against brick walls with a dry, constant hiss. Yet the usual city sounds are being packed away under the storm. Hooves no longer ring sharply. Wheels no longer clatter with authority. Voices reach you as fragments, then fade. Boston streets are not arranged for easy surrender. They twist, narrow, so to widen, and turn with old habits, shaped by centuries of use rather than tidy imagination. Some roads still carry the memory of cow paths, or so people like to joke when lost, irritated, or both. In weather like this, the joke becomes less charming. Every bend catches wind differently. Every corner builds a drift with its own personality. You move carefully along the edge of the walkway, where the snow is shallower for the moment. Your boots press into a crust that breaks with a soft crunch. Underneath waits slush, cold and treacherous. It seeps toward your soles, eager as an unpaid bill. The hem of your coat grows heavy. Snow gathers in the folds of your clothing and clings like flour to dark wool. A gas lamp burns ahead, its globe haloed by flying white. The flame inside flickers but remains stubborn, a small public promise in a badly behaved evening. Beneath it, a man wrestles with the shop shutter, trying to fasten the latch while the wind yanks the panel from his hands. He gives the shutter a look of deep personal disappointment. It bangs once, twice, then finally submits. You pass close enough to smell his pipe smoke, damp wool, and cold sweat. He nods at you with the quick seriousness strangers use in storms. There is no time for elegant conversation. The weather has become the topic and the answer. You nod back, and the simple gesture feels warmer than it should. On the main streets, Boston depends upon the horses for almost every moving thing. They pull wagons, carriages, omnibuses, fire equipment, delivery carts, and streetcars. Without them, the city's muscles weaken. Tonight those animals struggle through dew that thickens around their legs and balls beneath their hooves. Their breath pours into the air. Their ears flatten against the gusts. Every few yards, a driver must urge, coax, or apologize. You hear one horse before you see it. The harness bells give a muffled jingle, oddly festive in this miserable weather. Then a dark shape emerges, pulling a small wagon loaded with covered crates. The driver leans forward, shoulders rounded, reins tight in gloved hands. The wheels do not roll smoothly now. They lurch, bite, and sink. Snow packs around the spokes until the wagon seems to drag the street itself. The driver calls out, not to you exactly, but to the world in general. His words vanish. The horse steps carefully past, and you catch the animal's smell of wet hide, leather, manure, and steam. It is a warm, earthy smell, almost comforting, though not one polite society would bottle. The wagon leaves 2 grooves that begin filling the instant it passes. The storm is efficient. By the late 19th century, Boston's street railway system is one of the city's essential circulatory systems. Horse-drawn cars carry thousands through daily routines, linking homes, workplaces, markets, and stations. A severe storm can turn that system into a slow-motion puzzle of frozen rails and exhausted animals. Snow piles against the tracks, switches clog, schedules become hopeful fiction. People waiting at the stops learn the emotional range between patience and mutiny. You reach a wider crossing and pause. The wind here has space to build speed, and it uses the opportunity enthusiastically. Snow sweeps across the open stretch in sheets. The opposite side appears and disappears like a shoreline through fog. Somewhere nearby, a streetcar bell gives a desperate little clang. It sounds less like transportation and more like a plea. A group of passengers huddles under the lee of a building. Their faces are half hidden by scarves, veils, collars, and hat brims. A woman holds one hand over her bonnet, though the bonnet appears to have made peace with disaster. A clerk stamps his feet with the rhythm of restrained annoyance. A young man tries to look brave and merely looks cold. Everyone watches the rails, as though staring hard enough might summon civic order. A car finally appears, pulled by 2 horses and guided by a driver who deserves a monument or at least a very large supper. Its windows glow faintly through the snow, showing blurred faces inside. People press shoulder to shoulder, fogging the glass with breath. The car grinds forward, then halts. One wheel has found a ridge of frozen slush. The horses strain. The driver snaps the reins, then thinks better of it and leans down to speak to them. For a few moments, the city becomes a committee. Passengers inside shift their weight. Men outside step forward. Someone jokes that Boston has finally invented a stationary streetcar, ideal for those who dislike arriving anywhere. A small laugh moves through the huddled group, thin but real. Then 2 men push at the side and boots slipping. The horses pull again and muscles bunching under wet coats. The car jolts free, and everyone cheers softly. Because dignity is overrated when your feet are freezing. You continue walking, turning into a narrower street where the buildings stand close enough to make the storm feel intimate. Here, the snow piles against doorsteps and cellar entrances. It curls over iron railings like whipped cream. If whipped cream had hostile intentions, window wells fill quickly. Basement kitchens, already dim and damp, face the possibility of blocked light and colder air. The city's hidden lower rooms feel the storm first. From one doorway comes the smell of baking bread. It slips out when a woman opens the door just wide enough to pull in a boy carrying a bundle. Warmth flashes from within, along with lamplight, voices, and the rich scent of yeast. Then the door shuts, and the street returns to white breath and coal smoke. The scent lingers for a moment, almost painfully pleasant. There are many Bostons inside Boston tonight. There is the Boston of merchants and libraries, of polished boots and parlours. There is the Boston of dock workers, laundresses, seamstresses, and immigrant families snowbound shed in crowded rooms. There is the Boston of students, preachers, domestic servants, printers, watchmen, and children sent to bed beneath patched quilts. The storm touches all of them, but not equally. Weather may fall from the same sky, but comfort is distributed downstairs, upstairs, and sometimes not at all. You pass a tenement entrance where voices rise in several accents. The hallway smells of cabbage, kerosene, damp plaster, and many coats drying badly. A child peers through the crack of the door, eyes wide at the white street. Someone pulls the child back gently. The door closes, leaving only a strip of yellow light at your feet. The light trembles, then disappears under blown snow. Historians still argue whether storms like this strengthened neighbourhood bonds or exposed existing divisions more sharply. Some diaries and newspapers describe remarkable generosity, with strangers helping one another across buried streets. Other records show that the poorest residents face greater danger, especially when wages stopped, fuel ran low, and food deliveries failed. The truth is probably not tidy. Human kindness and human inequality can stand in the same doorway, wearing the same damp boots. At the corner, a policeman stands with his cape snapping behind him. His helmet is dusted white, giving him the look of a disappointed wedding cake. He holds a lantern low, its light wobbling across the snow. His task is partly order, partly guidance, and partly the ancient public service of looking official when nobody knows what is happening. You ask whether the crossing ahead is passable. He turns his face against the wind before answering. Passable, he says, if you are stubborn. That seems fair. You cross where he points, stepping into snow that reaches higher than expected. Your boot sinks to the ankle, then deeper. Cold presses around your foot like a hand. You pull free with effort, feeling wetness creep inward. The crossing takes longer than it should. A gust shoves hard at your shoulder, and for one breath you lean into nothing but white. The world narrows to the scrape of your soul, the lantern behind you, and your own pulse. Halfway across, you hear bells. Not church bells this time, but sleigh bells. Quick and bright, a sleigh glides into view, astonishingly graceful amid the chaos. Its runner blades hiss over the packed snow, and the horse pulls more easily than wheeled traffic, and the driver sits wrapped in furs, looking almost smug. This is one of winter's little jokes. The thing considered old-fashioned suddenly becomes clever again when wheels surrender. A quirky detail from 19th century city life is how quickly sleighs could reappear when deep snow made them useful. In ordinary slush, they were impractical and sometimes ridiculous. In heavy snow, they became swift, elegant, and faintly theatrical. Boston did not turn into a fairy tale. Of course, nobody should trust fairy tales with drainage, but for a few moments, runners could slip where the wheels only complained. The sleigh passes, leaving a faint groove and a gust of horse warmth. Then the wind erases its trail. You reach the far side and take shelter beside a brick wall. Breathing hard, and snow has found your cuffs, collar, and the back of your neck. It melts there with insulting precision. You brush at it, achieving very little. Winter appreciates effort, but rarely rewards it. Ahead, a row of shops grows dim behind falling snow. A pharmacy window glows greenish through glass jars and hanging signs. A bakery is shuttered. A tailor's sign swings from its bracket, creaking with each gust. A newspaper office still shows activity inside. Silhouettes moving behind lit windows. News does not sleep easily during disaster. It merely gets damp, hurried, and set in type by men with ink on their fingers. Near the newspaper door, a boy protects a stack of papers under his coat. His cap is pulled low, and his cheeks are raw from cold. He calls a headline, but the wind breaks it into pieces. You catch only storm, trains, and trouble. He grins anyway, because newsboys are professionally attached to noise. A man buys a paper, opens it, and immediately regrets exposing it to the weather. The pages flap wildly like a trapped bird. You move on, guided by lamps and memory. The storm makes distance difficult. A street you know well seems longer, then shorter, then oddly unfamiliar. Snow changes the scale of everything. Steps vanish, curbs soften, fences become low white ridges, a pump handle sticks out of a drift like a question mark. Even the proud brick facades lose their sharpness, their windows blinking faintly through the blow. You pause near a public building where the stone steps are already thickly coated. The columns rise into darkness. Solemn and chilled, snow gathers along carved ledges and window frames. Public architecture is meant to suggest permanence, but tonight even stone seems to shiver. You touch the iron railing with one gloved hand. The cold passes through the fabric immediately, clean and severe. A man nearby tries to clear a path with a shovel. Each scoop is thrown aside, and each gust tosses half of it back with comic malice. He stops, plants both hands on the handle and stares at the sky. The sky offers no apology. He resumes anyway. There is something quietly noble about work that nature keeps undoing. Also something extremely annoying. The atmosphere thickens as evening deepens, and chimney smoke hangs low, battered by gusts into strange shapes. It mixes with the smell of coal, snow, horses, wet wood, and sea air from the harbour. Boston's closeness to the water gives the cold a special damp edge. It does not simply chill your skin, it settles into seams, cuffs, lungs, and thoughts. You begin to understand how the city is being remade by accumulation. Not all at once, street by street, step by step. A familiar shop becomes a lit square in a white wall, a road becomes a trench, a doorway becomes a cave, a corner becomes a decision. The storm is not only covering Boston, it is editing it, removing details, simplifying routes, and leaving people to solve the revised edition in the dark. At another crossing, two women help each other through a drift, laughing from exhaustion rather than amusement. One loses a shoe briefly, which produces a sharp little cry, and then a flurry of searching. The shoe is found, packed with snow and thoroughly humbled. They continue arm in arm, skirts gathered, heads bent together. Their laughter trails behind them, bright and fragile. You follow the glow of lamps toward a residential block where curtains are drawn tight. Behind the glass, shadows move across ceilings. A hand lifts a shade, then lowers it. A face appears for a moment, watching the storm with the same disbelief you feel. Everyone is measuring the night in private ways. How much coal remains, how far a loved one must walk, whether the roof will hold, whether morning will bring work, worry, or both. The snow grows deeper near the houses, piled by the wind into soft walls. You lift your knees higher with each step. Your breathing slows into effort. The world smells cleaner here. Less of horses and shops, more of cold brick, chimney smoke, and snow itself. Snow has a scent, though it is almost an absence. It smells like air rinsed of colour. You stop under one last lamp and look back. Your own footprints are already softening. The path you made is being taken away, gently, without ceremony. That is the unsettling beauty of the storm. It erases proof. It makes every traveller temporary. Yet every window glowing through the whiteness says the same stubborn thing. Someone is here. Someone is keeping warm. Someone has not given up the match, the kettle, the coal, or the little circle of light. You draw your coat tighter and move towards a shelter, while the streets of Boston sink deeper into snow. The wind follows, muttering down the lane, brushing walls, lifting powder from my depths, and smoothing the city into a quiet white map that only the patient can read. You come indoors with snow clinging to your coat, your lashes, and the tired edges of your gloves. The door resists closing, as if the storm has pushed a shoulder into the gap. You lean your weight against it, hear the latch catch, and feel the house become a little more separate from the world. Not safe exactly, only enclosed. On a night like this, enclosed is already a blessing worth noticing. The entryway smells of wet wool, cold leather, lamp oil, and the sharp mineral scent of melting snow. You stand on a mat darkened by boots and old weather. Water gathers in little shining beads, then creeps toward the cracks between floorboards. Someone has placed a rag near the threshold, already defeated but still doing its best. You remove your outer things slowly, each layer stiff with damp and cold. Your fingers ache as you work at the buttons. They do not feel like clever instruments now. They feel like 10 cold sausages with responsibilities. When the gloves finally come off, your skin is red and marked at the knuckles. You hold your hands near the stove and feel the heat answer in stages. First it stings, then it deepens, then it returns you to yourself. The room is not grand. It is modest, crowded, and arranged for usefulness. A table stands near the wall, its surface marked by years of cups, elbows, sewing, and small repairs. A few chairs gather around the stove as if attending a lecture on survival. Shelves hold crockery, a tin box, folded cloth, and a few precious odds and ends. The window is sealed with curtains pulled close. Yet the wind still finds tiny paths around the frame. You feel the floor through your stockings. It is cold. A coal stove glows near the centre of the room. Black iron warm enough to command respect. Its belly gives off a steady heat, though never quite enough for every corner. The metal ticks as it expands and settles. From within comes the soft collapse of fuel turning to embers. Coal smoke, when managed well, is only a trace in the air. When managed poorly, it becomes an unwanted guest with terrible manners. In many Boston homes of 1888, warmth depends upon coal, wood, kerosene, candles, thick textiles, and constant attention. Central heating exists in some buildings, especially wealthier ones, but many households rely on stoves and fireplaces. Heat is local, not generous. It gathers where fuel is burning and thins quickly in hallways, bedrooms, and any room considered less important than the living. Winter teaches architecture humility. You move toward the stove and take the chair nearest its warmth without appearing greedy. This is a delicate social art. Everyone knows the best chair. Everyone pretends the best chair is a coincidence. The stove gives off a dry heat that tightens your cheeks and warms your knees. Your boots steam faintly by the hearth, releasing a smell of leather, street mud, and horse country, which is impressive in a city room. A kettle rests on the stoveplate, muttering to itself. Beside it, a pot holds soup made from yesterday's bones, barley, onion, and whatever vegetables remained willing. The smell is plain but comforting, savoury enough to soften worry. A loaf of bread sits beneath a cloth, its crust tough from the cold air. There is butter, perhaps, though not enough for wastefulness. Butter is optimism with a price. You sit and listen to the household settle into storm habits. Someone shakes snow from a scarf near the door, Someone moves a chair away from the draft. Someone checks that the lamp has enough oil. A child is told not to touch the stove, which is reasonable advice and often treated by children as an invitation to research. The child withdraws one finger and looks deeply wronged. Candlelight and lamplight mingle across the room. Softer than gaslight in the street, the flames make everything seem closer. Shadows gather under chairs and along the ceiling beams. A sewing basket rests open, with needles tucked into a little cushion shaped like a tomato. That bright red cushion is one of those small household objects that seems cheerful beyond its assignment. Even in a blizzard, it insists upon being a fruit full of needles. A quirky domestic tidbit belongs here. Tucked among the practical things, many households used bed warmers, heated bricks, soapstones, or even wrapped hot potatoes to take the first cruelty from cold sheets. The potato method sounds faintly ridiculous, but a warm object at your feet is no joke when the bedroom has turned into a polite icebox. Practical people rarely worry about appearing elegant while trying not to freeze. You take the cup offered to you. It may hold tea, weak coffee, hot water, or something herbal that tastes like a branch making an effort. Steam touches your face. The cup's rim is chipped, and your thumb fits into the worn place on the handle where many hands have rested. Outside, the wind presses at the wall. Inside, ahoy, the room answers with breath, fire, and the low music of spoons against bowls. Homes in Boston during this era are places of labour as much as rest. Keeping warm is work, cooking is work, carrying coal, hauling water, tending lamps, brushing ash, drying clothes, mending socks, and keeping children from treating frostbite as a personal experiment are all work. Much of this work falls upon women and girls, whether as family members, boarders, or paid domestic servants. Comfort is not a background condition. Someone has made it, minute by minute. Historians still argue whether 19th century urban homes should be remembered mainly as shelters from industrial life or as crowded extensions of labour itself. Some accounts emphasise affection, family routines, and the emotional safety of the hearth. Others point out that domestic space often demanded endless unpaid effort, especially from women and servants. Both readings sit together in the same warm room, not entirely comfortable with each other. You notice a young servant by the scuttle, lifting coal with practised economy. She does not heap the stove carelessly, because fuel costs money and panic burns too quickly. Her sleeves are rolled, her hands reddened from washing and cold water. She opens the stove door and a brief orange light flares across her face. Then she feeds the fire, closes the door, and wipes her fingers on her apron. The gesture is small, efficient, nearly invisible. From the ceiling comes the thump of a tenant moving about in the room above. The sound is familiar, almost companionable. In many Boston houses, privacy is thin. You may know a neighbour's cough, footsteps, quarrels, lullabies, and preference for moving furniture at unreasonable hours. Tonight those sounds reassure you. They mean bodies are present, lamps are lit, and walls are being shared against the storm. The window rattles hard enough to make everyone glance toward it. The curtains lift slightly, stirred by a thread of air. Someone rises and presses folded cloth into the gap at the sill. This is weatherproofing by persuasion. The cloth bulges, sag, then holds. The room grows a fraction quieter. Small improvements matter. They are victories without speeches. You eat slowly, because hot soup rewards patience. The spoon warms your lips. Barley gives under your teeth. Onion sweetness lingers at the back of your tongue. Outside, the storm scratches and roars. Inside, the soup carries salt, fat, and the memory of a kitchen earlier in the day. A plain meal becomes almost luxurious when the weather has become unreasonable enough to make hunger feel historic. Around the table, conversation moves in low tones. Someone wonders whether the milkman will come. Someone else says no milkman with sense would try. A third person observes that sense has never been a job requirement for men who rise before dawn. There's a little laugh, not loud but welcome. Worry sits at the table too, but humour keeps nudging it aside with an elbow. You hear the clock tick near the mantel. Its regular sound feels bold against the storm's disorder. Time inside the house is measured by tasks, flame, hunger, and sleepiness. Time outside is measured by drifting snow and failing visibility. The two kinds of time do not agree. The clock suggests order. The wind suggests otherwise. With considerable enthusiasm, a lamp is turned lower to save oil. The room darkens, but not unpleasantly. Faces soften at the edges. The stove's red seams become more visible, glowing like hidden lines in old iron. The smell of warm dust rises from nearby fabric. A shawl, hung too close, releases the scent of wool and faint lavender. Someone has tucked dried herbs in a drawer, and warmth has awakened them. You run your fingers over the table surface and feel scratches, dents, and one sticky place that no cloth has conquered. The table has known rent worries, holiday meals, cold breakfasts, letters read aloud, bills folded angrily, and bread sliced thin. It has held the weight of ordinary lives. Social history lives in such places, not only in parades, speeches, elections, and famous names, but in the way a family chooses who gets the warmest bowl. Near the stove, a child has grown drowsy. Their head tips against an older woman's arm. The woman keeps knitting, needles clicking quietly above the child's hair. The sound is soft and dry, like tiny bones tapping. Though less alarming than that description deserves, wool slides through her fingers, a sock lengthened stitch by stitch, proof that warmth can be planned even while snow blocks the street. You think of bedrooms waiting elsewhere in the house. They will be colder than this room by far. Blankets may be layered, coats spread over quilts, stockings worn to bed without apology. The first touch of sheets will shock the legs. Everyone knows this little nightly betrayal. A bed can look innocent all day and still greet you like a pond in January. Some households place carpets or straw matting to soften winter floors. Others use rag rugs made from worn cloth, braided and stitched until one life becomes another. Nothing useful is discarded quickly. Old dresses become quilts. Flour sacks become towels. Broken crockery may serve in gardens or drains. Ash has uses, grease has uses, even candle ends are saved. Waste is a luxury that poor households cannot afford and practical households distrust. The storm presses harder against the house. Somewhere in the chimney, the draft changes and smoke briefly enters the room. Everyone notices at once. One person adjusts the damper, another opens the stove door carefully, then shuts it again when the fire catches properly. The smoky smell thins. Eyes stop watering. No one remarks much on it. Domestic life contains many small emergencies that do not deserve drama, unless drama is the only thing available. You watch the flame in the lamp shiver and recover. Light is fragile here. It depends on oil, wick, glass, oxygen, and attention. A lamp poorly trimmed can smoke. A candle placed badly can gutter. A match can be damp. Darkness is never unimaginable. It waits just outside the circle of human management, patient as a creditor. Yet there is peace in the room too. Not perfect peace, not the painted kind. It is the quieter peace of shared limits. Nobody can command the storm to stop. Nobody can make the street clear by wishing. The household can only reduce the world to what can be tended. Fire, soup, cloth, lamp, door, a child, kettle, breath. That reduction is not failure. It is how people endure. You lean back and let the chair take more of your weight. The wood is hard, but the stove softens the complaint. The warmth reaches your shins. Your damp cuffs dry slowly. The smell of soup gives way to coal, wax, and wool. Conversation thins as the hour deepens. Every so often, wind finds the house and shakes it. just enough to remind everyone that comfort is a negotiation. At the window, behind the curtain, snow taps without rest. You do not need to look outside to know it is piling higher. The sound has changed from light pattering to a thick, sweeping rub, like fabric dragged across glass. The city beyond the wall feels distant now, reduced to rumour and weather. Inside, the stove glows, the clock ticks, and the table holds the remains of supper. You wrap both hands around the warm cup and lower your gaze to the little circle of light. The room breathes around you with its coal heat, damp wool, sleepy voices, and steady care. Boston may be vanishing under snow beyond the doorway, but here, in this modest shelter, winter is being answered in the oldest human way, not with conquest, with warmth kept carefully alive. You stand near a frosted pane and watch Boston's motion falter in the storm's thick white grip. The city is used to activity, to wheels and bells and boots and shouted instructions. It does not enjoy stillness. Boston prefers to be busy, preferably with a stern expression and an important errand. Yet the snow keeps falling, and the wind keeps rearranging every plan into something softer and slower and less impressive. A streetcar sits trapped near the bend, its lamps glowing weakly through crusted windows. The horses have been unhitched for a moment of mercy, their heads lowered, their flanks steaming in the cold. Passengers inside shift and peer outward, trapped between home and nowhere. Some press handkerchiefs to the glass and clear small circles to look through. The circles cloud again, almost instantly. The storm has no respect for curiosity. The car's wheels are buried deep along the rails. Snow is packed beneath the body, around the axles, and over the track roofs with remarkable ambition. A conductor stands outside with a shovel, attacking the drift in short, irritated strokes. His cap is white, his moustache is white, his mood, judging by posture, is several shades darker. Each scoop lands beside a and the wind politely returns part of it to his boots. Across the street, two men try to free a delivery wagon whose rear wheel is sunk into a hidden rut. The horse waits with the patience of an animal that has seen human confidence fail before. One man braces his shoulder against the sideboard. The other digs around the wheel with a coal shovel borrowed from somewhere. They count together, push, slip, and nearly sit down in the snow. The horse turns a one eye back at them, possibly with professional concern. Boston in 1888 depends upon movement in ways both obvious and invisible. Food arrives by wagon and rail. Newspapers move from presses to corners, coal travels from yards to cellars, letters, medicines, laundry, milk, and messages cross the city through human and animal labour. When streets choke and rails vanish, the entire urban body begins to stiffen. Nothing fails alone. A stuck cart can mean an empty shop, a cold stove, or an anxious family waiting at a window. You hear a distant whistle from the direction of the rail yards, faint and ragged through the wind. Trains are the pride of modern connection, iron proof that distance can be disciplined. Tonight, distance is misbehaving, snow piles along tracks outside the city, switches freeze, signals disappear behind white air. Locomotives that usually seem mighty now face drifts large enough to humble boilers, crews, and corporate optimism. Even steam has limits, which is rude but educational. At a station, you can imagine the platform lamps dimmed by swirling snow and the passengers clustered under roofs that offer less protection than advertised. Porters drag trunks a few feet, then stop to catch breath. A woman holds a carpet bag in both hands and refuses to set it down in slush. Men study posted notices, though the notices may say little more than delay. Delay, delay. That word is doing a lot of work tonight. The waiting room smells of damp wool, cigar smoke, coal soot, leather luggage, and human impatience. Benches fill with travellers whose plans have loosened from the clock. A salesman worries over missed appointments. A mother quiets a child with crumbs from a wrapped roll. A student opens a book and reads the same paragraph repeatedly, because anxiety turns literature into wallpaper. Near the stove, strangers become temporary neighbours, united by discomfort and the shared suspicion that railway companies are hiding something. A mainstream fact sits plainly beneath all this inconvenience. The blizzard of 1888 severely disrupted rail and telegraph service throughout the northeastern United States. Boston's ties to surrounding towns, markets, and communication networks were strained by snow, wind, and damaged lines. A city that trusted modern systems found those systems suddenly fragile. The lesson arrived without politeness, wrapped in ice and delivered overnight. Telegraph wires overhead suffer in their own dramatic fashion. They hum, sway, and collect ice until their neat lines sag into dangerous curves. In calmer weather, those wires carry messages swiftly through the air, turning distance into dots, dashes, and business decisions. In the storm, they become cold strings for the wind to play. Some snap under weight, others drag against poles. Communication begins to fail in little cuts, then in larger silences. You look up and see the wires dimly against the blowing snow. They tremble like black threads stitched across a white cloth. The sound is eerie, a thin vibration that rises and falls with gusts. Somewhere, a telegraph clerk may be leaning over his key, waiting for a reply that does not come. Or he taps again, he listens. The line gives nothing back. Silence, when expected to speak, can feel very loud. A quirky detail about storms and overhead wires belongs to this electric age of inconvenience. Severe weather helped strengthen arguments for placing certain urban wires underground. People were already worried about the tangled forest of poles and lines over city streets. After great storms, those arguments gained fresh power, because nothing says modern progress like a fallen wire lying across a snowbank with an attitude, "Oh, Boston, like other cities," had to reconsider where its nervous system belonged. The postman's route also collapses into uncertainty. He may still try parts of it, because duty and stubbornness are close relatives. His leather bag grows stiff with cold. Letters inside carry birthday wishes, invoices, invitations, condolences, gossip, and bills that would be quite content to arrive late. He lifts his knees through drifts, checks house numbers blurred by snow, and knocks where steps have vanished. Each delivery becomes less routine and more expedition. A milk wagon is abandoned near a corner, its cans rattling faintly under a canvas cover. Milk is a daily expectation in many households, especially where children wait with bowls and mothers plan carefully. Yet daily systems are vulnerable because they are daily. They offer little room for interruption. A missed delivery is not just inconvenience. It is breakfast changed, tea thinned, babies fussing, and budgets squeezed tighter around the next meal. You pass a bakery whose ovens may still be warm though the shutters are closed. Bread depends on flour, yeast, heat, hands, and timing. It also depends on fuel, delivery, and customers being able to reach the door. The smell that sometimes rolls into the street is absent now. Sealed inside or swallowed by the storm, snow curls along the threshold. A small sign bumps against the window. Closed, it says, with the simple authority of weather. At the livery stable, movement has not stopped but a changed character entirely. Stable hands work under lantern light, rubbing down horses, checking legs, drying tack, and offering feed. The air inside is thick with hay, manure, leather, oats, and animal warmth. After the street's bitter wind, the smell seems almost luxurious. Though polite noses might need encouragement, horses stamp and snort, there are coats steam, their eyes shine into the lamplight like dark polished stones. The animals are not machines. However much a busy city relies upon them, they tire, stumble, panic, and suffer. Drivers understand this deeply. Others learn when a horse refuses to move another step. The storm exposes the biological heart of urban transport. Beneath schedules and routes stand muscles, lungs, hooves, and courage. 'Tis difficult to run a metropolis when your engine requires oats and can look disappointed in you. Historians sometimes disagree about how people balance practicality and compassion toward working animals during severe 19th century storms. Some records describe careful care, rest, and rescue of horses trapped in drifts. Other accounts reveal hard use, injury, and neglect under pressure to keep goods and people moving. The evidence suggests a complicated world where affection, profit, necessity, and exhaustion pulled against one another in the same harness. You step away from the stable and notice how many ordinary errands have become impossible. A tailor cannot deliver a finished coat, a printer cannot send circulars, a laundress cannot return clean linen without dragging a basket through snow deep enough to insult her knees. A doctor may still attempt a call, but even his commitment must negotiate with blocked streets and failing horses. The city is not merely delayed, it is being asked to choose what matters most. Near a cornier market, several people gather under the awning. Though the awning sags dangerously with snow, they speak in low voices about flour, coals and candles, and whether the trains will run by morning. One man insists the interruption cannot last. Another says the storm has already made a fool of confidence. A woman listens without joining, then buys what she can carry. Her basket is small, her judgment is not. Inside the market, the air smells of dried beans, onions, molasses, salt fish, apples, burlap, and sawdust dampened by snow tracked in from boots. Shelves are not empty, but everyone can see how quickly certainty narrows when resupply stalls. The grocer weighs goods with careful hands and watches the door each time it opens. Cold enters in a rush, lifting paper wrappers and lamp flames. Customers flinch, then pretend they did not. Coins pass from hand to hand, cold and slightly wet. A shopkeeper writes in a ledger by lamplight, keeping accounts even while the world outside refuses arithmetic. Credit matters here. Trust matters. Who can pay today? Who can pay next week? Who is known? Who is desperate? Who has already asked too often? Storms may flatten streets, but social balances remain uneven as stacked tins on a narrow shelf. You carry a small parcel beneath your coat to keep it dry. It warms slightly against your ribs. Snow strikes the side of your face each time the wind shifts. A wagon bell sounds somewhere, then stops abruptly. Perhaps the wagon has turned back. Perhaps it is stuck. Perhaps the driver has decided that bravery is overrated and tea is underrated. This is not cowardice. This is wisdom arriving in mittens. The ferries face their own uncertain battle along the harbour. Ice, wind, and poor visibility make crossings dangerous. While schedules buckle under practical fear, workers who depend on the water routes may find themselves stranded on the wrong side, counting coins, hours, and chances. Boston's harbour is a gateway, a workplace, and a boundary. In a storm, it becomes a moving black question beneath the snow. A bell from that direction sounds dull and lonely. The note travels through the city differently than a church bell. It carries water in it, and distance, and danger. You cannot see the harbour from where you stand. Yet its presence enters the air through damp cold and a faint salt smell. Even here, among brick walls and shuttered shops, the sea has a hand on the weather. The snow has grown higher around wheels and steps. Some residents begin tunnelling paths from doors to street, forming narrow trenches with walls of packed white. Others wait, hoping the wind will calm before labour begins. Waiting has risks, digging has risks. The storm is generous that way. It offers many forms of discomfort and lets everyone select according to strength, need, and temperament. At one house, A man tries to open his front door outward and discovers the drift has other plans. You hear a thump, a pause, another thump, then muffled words from inside. A neighbour with a shovel arrives, laughing quietly while digging him free. The trapped man emerges looking offended by both snow and assistance. His dignity follows several seconds later, brushing itself off. You walk past a small church where the steps are nearly lost. Its windows glow faintly, amber shapes in the storm. Perhaps someone has opened the building for stranded travellers, or perhaps a caretaker remains inside, tending the stove and wondering whether the roof will complain. Churches often serve more than spiritual purposes in harsh weather. They are landmarks, shelters, gathering places, and occasionally the warmest room near a frozen corner. The city's shutdown is not a single dramatic moment. There is no bell that announces the surrender of movement. Instead, Boston stops through thousands of smaller failures. A wheel sinks, a rail clogs, a wire breaks, a ferry holds, a train waits, a horse refuses, a shop closes, a messenger turns back. Each decision is modest, but together they create a silence large enough to cover neighbourhoods. You find yourself standing in the middle of a street that would normally push you aside with traffic. Tonight it is almost empty. Snow sweeps past your boots in low ribbons. Lamps glow at intervals, each one a dim island. The absence of wheels feels uncanny. You can hear your own breathing, the rub of your sleeve, the creak of leather as you shift your weight. The city has not died. It has curled inward. A final streetcar bell rings somewhere behind the veil of snow. It gives one lonely note, then another. The sound fades before you can tell whether it moves closer or farther away. You imagine passengers stepping down at last, choosing to walk, sharing umbrellas that the wind immediately mocks. You imagine the conductor closing the car with numb fingers, leaving it to sit like a stranded parlour on iron rails. The storm continues its steady work. It softens the stalled wagon, buries the rail, feathers the telegraph pole, and rounds the roof lines into sleeping shapes. Boston's proud systems rest unwillingly beneath the snow, modern and helpless for a few long hours. You turn toward the nearest glow of shelter, carrying the memory of halted wheels and patient horses. The city is still here, but its motion has gone quiet, folded under white drifts like a clock wrapped carefully for the night. You hear the city through voices now, because the storm has stolen so many other guides. Streets blur, lamps fade, and familiar corners become pale uncertainties. Yet sound still travels in scraps through the weather, carried oddly by wind, swallowed, then returned from unexpected directions. A shout may seem close when it belongs to the next street. A knock may sound distant when it is just beyond the wall. You stand inside a narrow hallway where several residents have gathered near the front door. The door is not open, because nobody here is eager to invite the blizzard inside for conversation. Instead, people listen, their faces turned toward the wood whenever footsteps crunch near the stoop. The hallway smells of kerosene, damp coats, cabbage water, boot leather, and plaster chilled by the night. A lamp on a bracket gives a thin yellow light. Someone knocks twice, everyone grows still. The knock comes again, followed by a muffled voice asking for directions. A man in shirt sleeves lifts the latch and opens the door only a hand's width. Snow rushes into the gap like an impatient animal. On the stoop stands a young messenger, cap bent low, face red with cold, holding a folded note beneath his coat. He has lost the street number in the storm, and his boots are packed with snow to the ankles. The household argues softly about the address. One woman knows the family name, another knows the house, but not the number. An older man claims the lane turns left past the bakery. Though the bakery cannot be seen tonight unless one has the vision of a saint or a very committed cat, at last someone gives directions by memory, not sight. 3 doors down her, then across, then count 2 iron railings. The messenger nods, repeats it, and disappears into whiteness. The door shuts with effort. For a moment, the hallway feels warmer simply because he's no longer outside. That is how storms alter sympathy. Every stranger becomes a possible worry. Every footstep is judged by whether it continues. Every shout is sorted quickly into ordinary annoyance, honest confusion, or danger. Boston is a city of many accents, many trades, many tempers. Tonight, all of them must pass through the same freezing air. Near the door, a woman cups her hands around her mouth and calls to a neighbour across the narrow street. Her voice rises into the wind, stretched thin but determined. The answer comes back after a pause, broken into pieces. Yes, they have coal. No, the baby's cough is no worse. Yes, the husband is not home yet. That last answer sits heavily in the hall. Nobody says much. Silence is sometimes how concern takes off its hat. Communication in 1888 depends on many layers, from telegraph offices to newspapers, church bells, police whistles, messengers, servants, porters, and neighbours calling over fences. When wires fail and transport slows, the human voice regains old importance. It crosses stairwells, yards, alleys, and boarding house walls. It carries news, warnings, jokes, prayers, and gossip, all with equal urgency when the lamp is low. A police whistle sounds somewhere outside, shrill and brief, then another answers from farther away. You cannot see the officers, but you imagine them moving through drifts with lanterns held low, checking crossings, stranded vehicles, and doors blocked by snow. Their boots fill and refill, their capes snap. Their fingers stiffen around metal and wood. Public order becomes less about rules and more about finding out who needs help reaching shelter. You step into a front room where the curtains remain drawn against the coal. Around the table, several neighbours have been invited in for warmth. News and the comfort of pretending this is an informal visit. It is not an informal visit. It is weather diplomacy. Chairs are shifted. Cups are poured. Space is made with the slightly strained grace of people who have limited room and decent manners. A widow from the next house sits nearest the lamp, holding a shawl tight beneath her chin. Her cheeks are flushed from cold, and her hair has escaped its pins in silver threads. She reports that a man fell near the corner but rose again laughing, which everyone agrees is better than rising again furious. A carpenter says 2 streetcars are trapped beyond the square. A laundress says her cousin heard that trains are stopped. Nobody knows what is fact, but everyone owns a portion of rumour. The room receives each report carefully. Rumour travels faster than snow, and usually with less discipline. Still, it has uses. It helps people map danger, even when details wobble. Where is the drift highest? Which shop remains open? Which doctor is nearby? Has anyone seen the coal wagon? The night becomes a puzzle assembled from voices, each piece damp, imperfect, and carried in by someone with reddened ears. A boy sits on the floor near the stove, listening so hard his mouth hangs open. He should perhaps be in bed, but the storm has made bedtime negotiable. He wants to hear of buried wagons, brave horses, and men blown into snowbanks. Adults understand this appetite. Disaster, at a safe distance from the stove, becomes entertainment. A little danger improves a child's attention wonderfully, which is inconvenient but true. A newspaper boy arrives next, stamping snow from his boots in the entry. He is allowed only as far as the threshold, where he sells 2 damp copies from beneath his coat. His fingers are purple at the tips, and his voice cracks with cold and importance. He delivers headlines half from print and half from imagination, a blend suited to terrible weather. The newspapers, after all, must compete with the storm for drama. He says the trains are buried. He says wires are... Lie down. He says one gentleman vanished into a drift and emerged without his hat, which everyone treats as believable and nearly tragic. Hats matter in Boston. Respectability rests partly on the head, and the weather has no class sensitivity at all, someone gives the boy a crust of bread with his coins. He accepts it quickly, then steps back into the cold, already calling down the street. Newsboys in the late 19th century are familiar figures in American cities, selling papers in loud voices from corners, stations, and busy streets. Many are poor boys, some with families, some without steady homes, all working in weather that would make adults complain at professional length. During a storm, their role can become stranger. They carry information, but also proof that the city's public life has not entirely collapsed. Historians remain divided over how to interpret such child labour in urban life. Some older accounts romanticize newsboys as plucky young survivors, full of wit and street wisdom. Many modern scholars emphasize insecurity, exploitation, and the harsh economy that required children to earn in dangerous conditions. Both images can appear in one boy at the door, smiling bravely while his hands shake from cold. In the room, the lamp flame wavers as the door closes again. Conversation lowers. A man who has been quiet begins describing a night watchman he knows near a warehouse district. The watchman makes rounds with a lantern, checking locks and fires while most of the city sleeps. Tonight, he must also judge whether roofs are straining, whether drifts block exits, whether thieves are foolish enough to work in a blizzard, which seems ambitious even for thieves. You imagine that watchman crossing a yard between brick warehouses, lanterns swinging at knee height, snow squeaks beneath his boots, ice gathers in his beard. The warehouse walls loom dark and plain, smelling faintly of stored goods, rope, wood, and cold iron. He pauses at each door, tugs the handle, listens, then moves on. His lantern makes a small golden circle that travels with him through the white dark. Somewhere nearby, church bells may be used not only for worship but for warning, timekeeping, and commutamenti duty awareness. In many neighbourhoods, bells helped shape public rhythm. They mark hours, services, alarms, and sometimes emergencies. Tonight, their sound is muffled by the storm, but not erased. A bell tone reaches through snow with a softened edge, like memory passing through cloth. A woman in the front room begins to hum under her breath, perhaps without noticing. The tune is familiar to some, unfamiliar to others. It settles the child on the floor and fills a space that worry might otherwise occupy. Music does not need much room. It can live between a kettle and a window, between fear and manners. Her voice is low, worn, and steady. You feel the atmosphere change when singing enters it. The storm remains powerful. Of course, a hum cannot plough a street, repair a wire, or deliver coal. That would be convenient, and musicians would be insufferable. Yet sound can hold people together when action is limited. It gives breath a pattern. It lets anxious hands rest. It reminds the room that human beings are not only weather patients but makers of warmth. A knock comes from the wall, not the door. 3 taps, then 2. The woman nearest the stove smiles and taps back with a spoon on the pipe. This is communication through architecture, simple and slightly ridiculous. The neighbours beyond the wall have used the signal to ask whether all is well. The answer returns through plaster and wood. Yes, for now. The wall has become a telegraph for people without wires. A quirky detail of urban life is how residents often knew buildings by sound. Pipes clanged, stairs complained. Floorboards identified family members, and dumbwaiters carried not only dishes but gossip. In crowded houses, privacy was porous enough to strain soup through. During storms, that porosity could help. A cry, cough, knock, or unusual silence might alert someone next door. Walls were thin, but thin walls sometimes listened kindly. You move closer to the window and lift the curtain just enough to look out. Snow immediately flashes in the gap. Across the street, a lantern bobs near the ground. 2 figures are helping a third along the path, their heads bent together. One carries a bundle, perhaps blankets or clothing. Their voices rise and fall, but the words are lost. You see effort in their posture, and that is enough. The lamp inside reflects in the glass, placing the room over the storm like a ghost. Faces behind you appear faintly beside the dark street. For one strange moment, indoor and outdoor worlds overlap. The widow's shawl floats over the snowbank. The child's round face hovers above the buried curb. The stove glow rests on the neighbour's shutter. Then you lower the curtain and return to the room's actual warmth. A man enters from the kitchen with more hot water. Steam lifts from the pitcher and drifts through lamplight. Cups are filled again, weaker now, because leaves and coffee grounds must serve beyond their first proud moment. No one complains. Hot liquid is hot liquid. Flavour can be encouraged by memory. Sugar is used sparingly. Milk is discussed with the reverence usually reserved for distant relatives or unpaid debts. Conversation turns toward absent people. A brother working at the docks, a daughter employed in a household across town, a boarder who took the late car and may now be walking. Names gather in the air. Each name is a small candle. Some are spoken lightly, others with forced calm. Storms make maps emotional. Distance is no longer measured in streets, but in all the things that might happen between one door and another. Then someone tells a story to ease the room. It concerns a man who once claimed no storm could delay him from supper. He supposedly walked through snow so deep he entered his own house through a second-story window. Nobody believes this entirely, but belief is not the point. The room laughs gently. The child asks whether the man removed his boots first. This is considered an excellent question. Outside, the wind changes pitch. It becomes lower, more continuous, almost like a vast organ note beneath the city. The windows tremble in their frames. Ash shifts in the stove. The lamp flame thins, recovers, and leans. People stop speaking for a moment, listening together. In shared silence has a different texture from loneliness. It feels woven, not empty. You think of all the voices scattered through Boston at this hour. A doctor calling instructions over a stair rail. A mother telling a child there is nothing to fear, while fearing several things privately. A priest or minister offering shelter in a church room, a boarding house keeper counting residents, cab driver cursing adrift with admirable creativity, a telegraph clerk muttering at deadlines. Each voice is small alone, yet together they make the city audible beneath the storm. The night deepens, and still the voices continue. They travel through halls, cross alleys, along staircases, from door to door. They carry the practical language of survival. Are you warm enough? Have you seen him? Is the stove drawing properly? Can you spare a candle? Do not try that crossing. Take my arm. Come inside. Wait here. These are not grand speeches. They are better than grand speeches. You sit again near the table and let the room's sounds settle around you. The spoon taps the cup. The child sighs into sleep. The widow folds her hands. The wind moves along the outside wall, searching every seam, finding some, missing others. Beyond the door. Boston is muffled, uncertain, and half buried, but not voiceless. In the dark, under snow and worry, people keep calling to one another, and each answer becomes a little lantern held against the night. You sit at the table while the room grows quieter, and the household begins counting what remains, not yet, but with the careful attention winter teaches to ordinary people. A candle is measured by the inch, coal is judged by the scuttle, bread is examined by weight, not beauty. Even the lamp flame seems to understand that extravagance would be in poor taste. The storm outside may feel huge, but survival inside has become wonderfully small. A match, a crust, a kettle, a spoonful of tea leaves coaxed into another cup. You watch hands move across the table, arranging and preserving, folding paper around food, covering butter, saving every useful done scrap. Domestic economy has a rhythm, almost like prayer, though with more crumbs and fewer hymns, and the candle nearest you burns in a brass holder spotted with old wax. Its flame leans whenever the draught slips under the door. Around the wick, the wax softens into a shining pool, then hardens along the rim in pale ridges. Someone pinches away a charred bit with tiny scissors. The flame steadies afterward, smaller but cleaner. Even light needs maintenance. It is rather needy when you think about it. In many Boston homes, candlelight is no longer the only option by 1888. Kerosene lamps are common, gaslight exists in many urban buildings, and wealthier homes may enjoy brighter, steadier illumination, yet storms expose the limits of progress. Gas fixtures depend on supply and infrastructure, lamps depend on oil, candles depend on saved money, careful warm storage, and the hope that nobody knocks one over while reaching for pickles. You feel the table under your wrists, cool beyond the lamp's reach. The room smells of wax, coal ash, damp wool, stale bread, and onion skins warming near the stove. These scents are not elegant, but they are honest. They belong to a room where people are trying to stretch comfort across more hours than planned. Comfort, tonight, has become a budget. A woman takes inventory aloud, not loudly, only enough for those near her to hear. Half a loaf, a pot of soup, some beans, tea leaves already used once, a little molasses, a heel of cheese wrapped in cloth, 2 candles in the drawer, one crooked and one respectable. The list is plain, but it carries the weight of decisions. What is eaten now cannot be eaten at dawn. The coal scuttle sits near the stove, black dust marking its lip. Someone lifts it and judges the weight by feel. Coal is not merely fuel, it is time made visible. A full scuttle means hours of heat, warm hands, thawed boots, soup kept alive, and water that can be boiled. An empty scuttle means negotiation with cold. Cold is a poor negotiator. It tends to make the same demand repeatedly. You hear coal settle inside the stove, a soft clink followed by a deeper glow. The iron surface radiates heat against your knees. Someone closes the draft a little, guarding the burn. Too much air consumes fuel quickly. Too little makes shake and sulking embers. The stove must be handled like a difficult uncle, encouraged without being indulged. Everyone seems to know this without saying to. Food systems in 19th century Boston rely on daily circulation from markets, wagons, rail connections, harbour trade, and small shops. Many households buy in modest amounts because storage is limited and wages arrive in narrow streams. A storm that blocks streets interrupts more than comfort. It unsettles credit, meals, childcare, and the timing of work. The pantry becomes a map of class, habit, luck, and preparation. You watch a loaf being sliced carefully. The knife moves slowly, making thin pieces that preserve the illusion of abundance. Crumbs are brushed into a small bowl rather than abandoned. They may thicken soup later, or feed birds when the world becomes generous again. Nothing vanishes without consideration. Even a crust has a future, which is more than some grand political speeches can honestly claim. A child asks for another piece and is given half. The child looks at it, then at the adult, performing a silent legal argument. The adult raises one eyebrow. The case is closed. The child eats the bread anyway, because hunger has a way of accepting unfavourable rulings. The room softens with a few tired smiles. In the corner stands a covered pail of water. It is more precious than it looks. Pipes may freeze, pumps may be difficult to reach. Snow can be melted, but it takes heat, and heat costs fuel. Clean water must be guarded from dirt tracked in by boots, and from the casual disaster known as children being helpful. Someone checks the lid and moves the pail farther from the cold wall. The lamp on the table has a glass chimney darkened at the top. A man removes it, wipes away soot with a scrap of cloth, and sets it back carefully. His fingers are broad, but the motion is delicate. The flame brightens through clearer glass. Shadows retreat a little. Everyone benefits from this tiny act, though nobody applauds. Household labour rarely receives the fanfare it deserves. Perhaps that is why it keeps looking annoyed from the corner. Historians still argue whether household thrift in this period should be understood mainly as virtue, necessity, or social pressure. Advice books praised careful management, especially by women, as evidence of moral order. Yet for poor families, thrift was not a charming trait but a daily emergency. It is possible to admire skill while still noticing how unfairly survival depended on it. A small account book lies near the lamp. Its cover is soft at the corners from use. Inside are numbers written in a neat hand, columns for coal, rent, milk, candles, flour, soap, and occasional medicine. The writing is careful because care is cheaper than error. You imagine the pressure of those numbers across the month, each item pulling against another. Buy fuel or mend shoes, pay the grocer or delay the tailor, add a candle or sit in shadow. The storm makes these choices sharper. If wages cannot be earned tomorrow, the money expected tomorrow becomes imaginary. If a servant cannot reach her employer, a household elsewhere may be inconvenienced, but she may lose pay. If a labourer cannot reach the docks or yards, food at home tightens. Weather moves through the economy like cold through floorboards, finding the weakest seams first. You hear a drawer open, inside are candle stubs, string, folded paper, buttons, a broken comb, and little mysteries of household saving. Everyone has a drawer like this, a museum of things not quite useless enough to throw away. The candle stubs are sorted. Some can be fixed onto a saucer and burned under a watch. Others may be melted later. If the household has time, patience, and the temperament of a small-scale alchemist, a quirky tidbit of domestic life hides among such objects. People sometimes used rushlights, dipped tapers, or improvised lighting in older and poorer settings, though by 1888 kerosene and manufactured candles were much more common in cities. The old habits did not vanish cleanly. Households kept tricks from parents and grandparents, because poverty has an excellent memory. Progress arrives, but the rag drawer remains unconvinced. The kitchen shelves hold jars and packets that seem humble, until the weather becomes serious. Salt, pepper, dried apples, beans, oatmeal, vinegar, small tinned baking powder. These are not luxuries. Yet they can transform monotony into something bearable. A spoonful of molasses in hot water gives sweetness and warmth. A little onion in fat can make a room believe supper is larger than it is. The nose is easily flattered. Poor thing. You breathe in as someone warms leftover soup. The smell thickens, filling the room with barley, pepper, bone broth, and browned onion. Steam gathers on the window behind the curtain, and then chills into dampness along the sill. The soup is stirred slowly to prevent scorching, because burned food is a tragedy with witnesses. The spoon scrapes the pot's bottom in a circular rhythm. Outside, the wind rattles a loose shutter. Inside, a woman counts matches into a small tin. She does this without embarrassment. Matches are cheap only when shops are open and money is ready. Tonight each one is a little thunderbolt waiting in wooden sulphur. Damp can ruin them. Carelessness can waste them. Children must not play with them, which children consider another failure of adult imagination. You hold one match between your fingers and feel its lightness. It weighs almost nothing, yet it can change a room. It can light a lamp, start a stove, relight a candle, warm soup, and calm nerves. Human beings have always been sentimental about fire, and with reason. Civilization sometimes looks like law courts and libraries. Sometimes it looks like one dry match in a tin box. A neighbour arrives with a request for oil. Not much, only enough to keep a lamp going for a sick room. the request still tightens the air. Giving away oil means shortening your own light. Refusing means leaving someone else in darkness. The woman of the house asks no grand questions. She pours a little into a small bottle and corks it firmly. The neighbour thanks her twice, once with words and once with her eyes. The exchange changes the room. Scarcity has not made everyone selfish. It has made kindness measurable. That is harder. Somehow, giving from abundance can feel easy and graceful. Giving from a limited supply has a different texture. It is rougher, quieter, and more intimate. The bottle disappears beneath the neighbour's shawl, and the door opens just long enough for cold to shove its way in. You hear boots scraping outside the threshold. Someone has placed ash on the step for traction. Ash, sand, salt, and scraps of carpet can all become tools against ice. The ash leaves grey smears on the snow, ugly and useful. Beauty is not invited to every practical decision. Sometimes the correct answer is a bucket of stove waste thrown carefully where people are likely to fall. The household begins preparing for a night of uncertain length. Extra cloth is hung over the door. Chairs are pulled closer to the stove. A shawl is shared across 2 laps. The lamp is turned lower again, and the full room contracts into amber half-light. Faces become softer, more tired, and harder to read. The stove glow paints red lines along the iron and a faint warmth across the floor. Someone darns a sock by the lamplight, stretching the wool over a wooden egg. The needle flashes once, then disappears through the weaves. It is slow work, but holes are expensive. A stocking repaired tonight may be worn tomorrow through slush and drifts. The thread smells faintly of wool grease. The worker's hands are chapped, but steady. Repair is another form of budgeting, only quieter. You notice how many senses are involved in household management. The ear hears the stove drawer properly. The nose detects smoke before danger grows. The hand judges bread, coal, damp cloth, and fevered skin. The eye reads flame, shadow, and shrinking supplies. Nothing is abstract. Economy is not merely labor as in an account book. It is the body learning the cost of warmth. A man near the table tries to calculate whether the remaining coal can last until morning. He speaks softly, almost to himself, counting hours against scoops. Someone reminds him that the stove can be banked during sleep. Someone else says sleep may be optimistic with that wind. He smiles faintly. The wind, having overheard nothing, makes its own rude comment against the wall. There is another matter, too, one nobody likes to discuss for long. Fire is comfort, but also danger. A crowded room with lamps, candles, drying clothes, paper, curtains. Entire people must remain watchful. Urban fires have taught Boston hard lessons across generations. Every flame is placed with care. Every cloth is kept at a distance. The desire for warmth must never outrun caution. Fire is a friend with a complicated personality. The candle burns lower, wax slides down one side and stiffens like a frozen tear. Someone shields the flame while trimming it again. The smell of the snuffed wick rises, bitter and brief. Then the clean flame returns. You watch it settle into itself, bright at the core, blue near the base, gold at the top. It seems impossibly small against the storm outside, yet it holds its place. You feel your own breathing slow with the room's rhythm. Count, save, mend, pour, stir, bank, trim, share. These are the verbs of the night. They are not glamorous verbs. They do not gallop. They endure. The storm may command the streets, the rails, the wires, and the harbour, but inside this circle of light people answer with old skills and careful hands. The lamp is lowered once more, and shadows come closer without becoming frightening. The stove gives a sleepy metallic click. Soup rests covered, bread waits under cloth, matches return to their tin, coal holds its red heart behind iron. around you. Boston's household economies whisper their steady lesson. Survive gently, spend slowly at peaks, keep the flame clean, and never underestimate the power of one candle guarded well through a howling winter night. You move in imagination toward the harbour, where Boston's winter night grows wider and more restless. The streets near the water feel different, even under snow. The air carries salt, tar, fish, coal smoke, and the damp breath of the Atlantic. Cold comes from every direction here. It slides down the lanes, climbs through cuffs, and settles under your collar with the confidence of a tax collector. The waterfront is not silent, it groans. Ships strain against lines drawn tight by wind and tide. Wooden hulls creak softly. The sound deep and tired, like old furniture under a heavy sleeper. Rigging taps and shivers overhead. Though many vessels have reduced their sails and secured whatever can be tied down, chains knock against posts, loose blocks clatter. The harbour speaks in metal, rope, water, and wood. Snow blows across the wharves in ragged sheets, but it does not fall here with the same softness as inland streets. It mixes with spray, grit, and frozen slush. Underfoot, the boards are slick and uneven. Your boots find ridges of ice hidden beneath powder. One step feels safe, the next uncertain. The surface smells of brine and old cargo, with a faint sour trace from barrels, bait, and low tide. A lantern swings near a warehouse door, its light moving back and forth over stacked crates. The glow catches the edges of rope coils, wet tarpaulins, and iron hooks. Everything seems half awake. Nothing looks friendly exactly, though the lantern is making an effort. In its unsteady circle, a dock worker bends to tighten a cover over the goods that must not soak through. His hands are thickly gloved, but still clumsy with cold. He pulls the canvas hard and ties it down with short, practical knots. The wind tries to lift the corner at once, because the wind is apparently supervising. He mutters into his scarf, reties the knot, and steps back. Snow coats his shoulders. His cap is rimmed white. The work is not dramatic, yet a loose cover can ruin merchandise, wages, and someone's patience by morning. Boston's harbour in the late 19th century remains one of the city's great working spaces. Ships, ferries, warehouses, fish dealers, coal yards, customs activity, and coastal trade all connect the city to a wider Atlantic world. Even as railroads grow more powerful, the harbour still matters deeply. Goods arrive by water. Workers earn by water. Weather from the ocean can feed a storm and then attack the very port that helped make the city rich. You pause beneath the lee of a brick warehouse, where the wind drops just enough for you to hear the water clearly. It saps against pilings with a cold, hollow rhythm. Ice grinds near the edges, not a smooth frozen sheet, but broken plates nudging and rubbing in dark water. The sound is faintly glassy. It suggests something fragile being handled by careless giants. Farther out, visibility collapses into a grey-white blur. Ships at anchor become only darker masses, their masts fading upward into snow. You cannot tell where hull ends and the weather begins. A bell rings from somewhere beyond sight, slow and muffled. It is answered by another sound, lower, perhaps from a vessel or harbour signal. The notes move strangely across the water. Distance has lost its manners. The smell of coal grows stronger near a yard where black heaps sit under thin snow crusts. Coal dust stains the white surface in grey patches. Men have shovelled paths between piles, though the paths are filling again. Coal is heavy, filthy, and absolutely beloved when the house is cold. It passes from mines to ships and trains, from yards to peons, from wagons to cellars, and finally into stoves where it becomes warmth, smoke, ash, and argument. A watchman approaches along the wharf with a lantern and a stick, testing the boards before stepping. His coat is buttoned tight, and his beard is stiff with frost. He asks whether you have business here, not harshly, but with the weary suspicion of a man whose night already contains enough foolishness. You answer that you are keeping to the lit path. He nods toward the warehouses and tells you not to trust the edge. That advice seems excellent. The edge of the wharf appears and disappears under blown snow. Beyond it lies black water with white flecks skittering across the surface. There is no romance in falling there tonight, only shock, weight, and a very rude ending to curiosity. You keep a respectful distance. The harbour does not mind. It has never acquired admiration to remain dangerous. A quirky waterfront tidbit lingers in the old working habits of port cities. Rats often knew more about warehouse conditions than inspectors did, or at least they behaved as if they did. Storms could drive them from lower spaces, sending them along beams, barrels, and dock edges in search of higher, drier comfort. Sailors and dockhands watched them with practical interest. When rats changed their routes, people noticed. Nobody liked admitting that rodents had become weather consultants, but useful advice wears many whiskers. Near a fish house, the smell deepens into salt, scales, wet wood, and cold flesh. The storm has slowed trade, but not erased the labour already done. Barrels stand under cover. A few crates are packed with ice that no one needed to import tonight, which feels like the weather showing off. Men inside speak in low voices as they secure doors and windows. Their boots thud on planks, a knife is cleaned and set aside. Fishing and coastal work are hard in ordinary seasons, and winter sharpens every edge. Hands split, lines freeze, decks glaze, schedules depend on tides, markets, and courage, all of which can become inconvenient at once. Families inland may eat fish without imagining the cold labour behind it. That is the usual fate of labour. Really, it vanishes into supper, then is judged for needing more salt. Historians still argue whether storms like this are best understood as natural disasters, urban infrastructure failures, or labour crises. The answer shifts depending on where you stand. From a parlour, the storm may be an interruption. From a rail office, it is a system failure. From a wharf, it is a threat to bodies, wages, cargo, and ships. Nature arrives broadly, but its consequences are always local. You hear shouting from a vessel tied along the pier. Two men move along the deck, shadows against lantern glow, checking lines that hum under strain. The ropes are thick, dark, and wet, wrapped around bollards like sleeping animals. When the wind gusts, the ship pulls hard and the line groans. One man bends close, testing for fray. Another adds a second line, because trust is sensible but backup is better. The deck shines with snow and ice. A hatch is covered and weighted. Barrels are lashed. A small boat alongside bumps and scrapes. Its painter pulled tight. The sailors work without wasted motion. Their voices carry as command, clipped by cold. You cannot hear every word, but tone is enough. Pull, hold, mind your footing, watch that line. Weather creates a language of verbs. Along the waterfront, lodging houses and taverns glow dimly behind frost-streaked windows. They shelter sailors, labourers, stranded travellers, and men whose plans have been rearranged by tide and snow. Inside, the air is likely thick with pipe smoke, damp wool, spilled ale, frying onions, and bodies grateful for walls. Laughter may rise there, loud enough to challenge the weather for a moment, so may arguments. Warmth encourages both. You pass one such window and see silhouettes around tables. A woman carries a tray between them, moving with practiced skill through close quarters. Someone lifts a cup in salute to someone else's bad fortune. A dog lies beneath a bench, wet paws stretched toward the stove. The dog looks wiser than most of the room, which is common in taverns and sometimes in history. Outside again. The cold wraps around you quickly. The contrast is sharp. Your cheeks tighten and your breath turns white. The harbour wind has a wet force that slips through layers more skillfully than dry inland cold. It smells of distance, salt, tar and iron. You draw your scarf closer and listen to the bell sounding again, beyond the storm. Ferries are uncertain in this darkness. Their routes connect neighbourhoods, workers, errands, and families across water that now rolls under snow and wind. A ferry landing stands nearly deserted, lamps glowing on posts crusted with ice. The waiting area holds footprints already softening at the edges. A posted schedule flaps behind glass. Cheerful as fiction, the boat is either delayed, held, or moving with great caution somewhere in the white confusion. A man stands near the shelter, peering into the harbour as though eyesight can bully weather. He carries a lunch pail and wears a coat too thin for standing still. He may be trying to reach home, or work, or someone waiting with worry and an overactive imagination. The lantern light catches snow on his eyebrows. He shifts from one foot to the other, listening for a bell, an engine, a shout, anything. You can feel how water changes waiting. On a street, you might choose to walk across harbour water. Choice narrows. You cannot reason with a crossing. You cannot shame a ferry into appearing. You can only wait, turn back, or make a dangerous decision, and dangerous decisions love cold and darkness and pride. The man eventually steps away from the edge and heads toward the nearest lit building. Wisdom is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply leaving the pier. At the customs buildings and warehouses, clerks may have abandoned desks or remain to protect records and goods. Paperwork is less romantic than rigging, but port cities run on documents as well as ropes. Manifests, receipts, duties, insurance papers, shipping lists, and bills bowls of lading make trade legible. Snow can halt a vessel, but lost paperwork can make grown men pale in any weather. Commerce has delicate nerves. A gust drives snow beneath the brim of your hat, and you turn toward a stack of barrels for shelter. The wood is cold under your gloved hand. Iron hoops bite faintly through the leather. You smell molasses from one set of casks, faint but sweet, mingling oddly with fish and tars. Another stack may hold flour or apples or salted goods. The world reaches Boston through containers, and tonight the containers sit patiently while the sky misbehaves. The harbour's darkness is not empty. It is full of held labour. Every rope tied, every crate covered, every lantern trimmed, every animal sheltered, every ledger closed against damp. Workers are not conquering the storm, they are reducing its chances. This is often the real art of survival, not victory. Prevention, a tied knot, a shut door, a warning shouted at the right moment. Snow gathers along the brim of a moored boat until a sailor knocks it away with a broom. The gesture is almost domestic, absurdly tender for a vessel built to face the sea. Sweep the boat, save the line, mind the hatch. Even ships need housekeeping. That realization is oddly comforting. The grand Atlantic and the small kitchen are not as different as they pretend. You walk along the safer side of the wharf, where the warehouse wall blocks the worst gusts. Your boots crunch over snow mixed with straw, cinders, and bits of rope fibre. The atmosphere is dim, salt-heavy, and alive with small impacts. Snow against canvas, ice against piling, rope against wood, lantern glass hooking under sleet. Somewhere a gull cries once, then thinks better of it. Even gulls possess limits. A harbour worker carries a coil of rope over one shoulder, moving toward the vessel with steady care. The coil is heavy and leaves dark, wet marks on his coat. His steps are slow, because slipping with that burden would be undignified and painful. Two things best not combined. Another man follows with a lantern held low. Together they become a little procession of necessity, moving through snow toward creaking wood. The wind briefly opens a clearer view across the water. You see dark masts, a warehouse roof, the faint glow of lamps on the opposite shore, and snow racing low over the black surface. Then the view closes again. It is like looking through a curtain. Someone keeps shaking. Boston's harbour remains present but unknowable, its familiar working shapes turned strange by night and weather. You stop beneath the lantern near the warehouse door and let the harbour sounds settle around you. The bell rings, the hull groans, ice whispers, ropes tighten. Men call across water and vanish into wind. Salt rests on your lips, cold dampens your glove. The air tastes old, as if it has travelled from far beyond the bay carrying stories nobody has warmed enough to tell. Inland, rooms may be small islands of fame and soup. Here, the islands are lanterns on wharves, lamps in taverns, cabin lights on the vessels, and guarded embers in watchhouses. Each one marks human intention against the moving dark. The harbour does not sleep, but it slows, listens, and endures. Beneath the howling wind, beneath the snow and brine, Boston's waterfront holds itself together by rope, wood, labour, and the patient glow of lamps kept burning beside black winter water. You sense the night thinning long before the sky grows pale. It is not morning yet, not in any generous way, but the hour has changed. The deepest dark begins to loosen around the edges, and the city stirs with people who do not have the luxury of waiting. Work begins in the cold because hunger, wages, illness, and duty are all very poor sleepers. The first sound is a shovel. It scrapes somewhere beyond the window and slow and rough against packed snow. Then comes another scrape, followed by a heavy breath and the thud of snow thrown aside. The rhythm is plain, almost musical. If your idea of music includes sore shoulders and frozen socks, someone is opening a path from a doorway to the street. Someone has decided the storm may continue, but the day will need a way out. You pull your coat close and step toward the entry, where cold gathers under the door in a pale line. The hallway smells of ash, lamp smoke, stale tea, and damp wool that never fully dried. A candle has burned low in its holder, leaving a collapsed ridge of wax around the base. The air feels tired. Houses can feel tired too, after holding back weather all night. Outside, so the world is changed into mounds and trenches. Steps are buried. Iron railings poke from drifts like thin black bones. Though nothing about the scene is cruel exactly, it is too soft for cruelty. Snow has rounded every harsh edge, disguised every curb, and lifted the street into strange new levels. Your boots sink immediately, and the cold climbs your legs with shocking enthusiasm. A man near the stoop digs with a broad shovel, working by lantern light. He cuts down into the drift and throws each load to the side, building a wall that will probably insult him later by falling back. His breath comes in white bursts. Snow clings to his eyebrows and beard. He does not look heroic. He looks practical, which is sometimes much better and almost always less noisy. Across the way, a woman sweeps loose snow from a narrow doorstep with a broom. The broom is not the ideal tool, but it is the tool she has. She moves quickly, sleeves pulled over her wrists, hair tucked under a scarf. A bucket of ash waits beside her. When she clears the top step, she scatters ash over the ice, making a grey path through white. It is not pretty, it is safer. Pretty can wait its turn. Before dawn, many workers must judge whether the city is passable enough for duty. Domestic servants consider distant households where fires must be lit and breakfast prepared. Telegraph clerks wonder whether lines can be restored or messages routed. Bakers face ovens that do not care about snowdrifts. Police, firemen, doctors, nurses, carters, stable hands, and labourers all measure the same question with different consequences. Can you get there? And what happens if you cannot? You see a young woman emerge from a side door with a shawl wrapped over her head and a basket tucked close. She pauses, testing the depth with one boot. Her face is pale in the lantern glow, but alert. Perhaps she works in a wealthier house several streets away, expected to help warm rooms that are not hers. Perhaps she's carrying laundry, food, medicine, or someone's message. Her basket creaks softly against her arm. She takes 3 careful steps, then stops as the wind pushes snow from a roofline in a powdery slide. It falls before her in a soft collapse. She looks at it for a moment. Her expression says everything a polite person must not say aloud at sunrise. Then she lifts her skirt a little, steps around the fresh pile, and continues. Necessity has very little patience for theatrical weather. A milkman appears farther down the street, though calling him a milkman today seems optimistic. His wagon cannot enter the narrow lane, so he carries cans by hand from a cleared corner. The metal handles bite into his gloves, the cans knock together with dull, hollow notes. Each door he reaches requires a new negotiation with snow, steps, and the household within. Milk has become a campaign. The smell around him is clean and cold, with a faint sweetness from the milk and a sharper odour from wet horse blankets near the corner. His horse stands by the wagon, head lowered, breath steaming. The animal's coat is crusted at the edges. Stable boy rubs its neck with burlap. Murmuring encouragement, the horse flicks an ear, which is possibly gratitude, possibly judgment. Horses can do both at once. Boston's food routines depend on such early work. Milk, bread, coal, and fresh provisions do not appear by magic, despite what comfortable breakfast tables sometimes imply. Delivery workers connect farms, depots, shops, and households through repeated physical effort. In a storm, that effort becomes visible. Every loaf and can arrives with a story of shovels, hooves, cold fingers, and someone muttering that the road was clearer last year. A baker's assistant trudges by carrying a sack over one shoulder. Flour dust marks his sleeves beneath the snow. He smells faintly of yeast, smoke, and warm ovens, a scent so comforting it almost feels unfair outdoors. Behind him, a cart stuck at the corner holds baskets covered with cloth. The cloth has collected snow along its ridges. Bread is waiting beneath. Still warmer than the air, like little loaves of defiance. You follow the shovel channel toward a wider street, where a small crew has begun clearing a route. Their shovels flash in lantern light, then vanish into drifts. Men work in uneven lines, cutting, lifting, throwing, pausing, and starting again. Some are city labourers, some may be hired by businesses, some are residents protecting their own access to street and shop. Snow removal is not yet the mechanised operation a future city will expect. It is backs, arms, blades, carts, horses, and time. The snow has different textures at different depths. The top layer is powdery where wind has kept it loose. Beneath lies packed weight, damp and stubborn. Near the street, slush and ice have formed a grey crust mixed with manure, ash, straw, and city grime. Each shovel load tells the history of the night in layers. White beauty above, urban reality below. Boston is nothing if not educational. A mainstream fact belongs in this labouring dawn. The blizzard of 1888 became famous partly because it exposed the vulnerability of cities that relied on above-ground transport and communication. Streets, rails, wires, and daily services failed under snow and wind. Clearing and repair took immense manual effort. The storm did not simply end when snowfall slowed. Its consequences had to be dug out by human bodies. Near a telegraph office, clerks and linemen gather in heavy coats. A lineman carries tools in a leather pouch, his fingers already stiff. He looks upward at sagging wires with a professional frown. Ice glazes the lines and poles. Snow clings to crossarms. A broken section hangs low near an alley, guarded by a policeman who keeps pedestrians away with a lantern and a voice trained by many foolish pedestrians. The telegraph office smells of ink. dust, wet boots, warm metal, and tired men. Inside a clerk sits at his instrument, listening for life in the line. His desk is crowded with message blanks, pencils, and a cup gone cold. When a signal comes through, even faintly, the room sharpens. A few taps can mean a restored connection, a rerouted report, or the simple relief of hearing another station answer. Communication returns like a pulse. You imagine the lineman climbing only when conditions allow, boots braced, belt tight, tools knocking properly against his hip. It is dangerous work even in reasonable weather, and this weather is not applying for reasonableness. Ice, wind, height, and live or damaged wires make every movement careful. He must know wood, metal, balance, and fear, especially fear. Sensible workers do not lack fear. They know where to place it. Historians still debate how much the 1888 storm accelerated demands for underground urban infrastructure. Some argue that it clearly strengthened public support for burying wires and improving transit resilience. Others caution that changes unfolded unevenly, shaped by cost, politics, technology, and local priorities. The blizzard became a powerful argument, but cities rarely transform because one night made a very persuasive mess. At a police station, the door opens and closes repeatedly as officers return, report, and depart. The room inside smells of coal smoke, damp uniforms, tobacco, and wet leather belts. A stove glows fiercely, surrounded by men thawing fingers while pretending not to enjoy it too much. A sergeant writes notes in a ledger. Reports come in about blocked lanes, missing persons, stranded wagons, fallen lines, and houses needing help at doors. One officer removes his gloves and flexes his fingers near the stove. His nails are rimmed with dirt from digging at a blocked entrance. He has helped free an elderly couple whose door was sealed by a drift. He describes it without flourish, because tired people rarely decorate their sentences. Someone offers him coffee so strong it may legally count as construction material. He drinks it gratefully. Fire companies face their own unease. Snow can block hydrants, doors, and apparatus. Horses must be ready, equipment cleared, and routes guessed through buried streets. Fire is always feared in dense cities, but snow creates a cruel contradiction. Everything looks cold and wet, yet stoves, lamps, candles, and crowded rooms increase risk. The firehouse must remain alert while the city around it seems wrapped in a white blanket. You pass a firehouse where men are clearing the large doors. The horses inside stamp and snort, harnesses hanging ready nearby, brass fittings glimmer in lamplight. A man with a broom sweeps snow from the threshold, while another chips ice with a short iron tool. The air carries hay, smoke, horse sweat, and polished metal. It is a scent of readiness, practical and tense. A quirky tidbit of city snow work appears near a corner, where boys have begun offering to shovel paths for coins. They argue over territory with the seriousness of little mayors. One claims the left side of the street. Another insists that he saw the doorway first. Their shovels are nearly as tall as they are. Their business model is simple, snow fell. Adults hate moving it, and boys enjoy money. Capitalism has entered the drift. One boy digs with wild energy, sending more snow onto the cleared path than away from it. His customer watches with a face of growing doubt. A second boy, more experienced, cuts clean blocks and stacks them neatly along the edge. Skill matters, even in childhood enterprise. The first boy pauses, studies the second, and adjusts his method. Education occurs, no school bell requires. As the sky lightens from black to iron grey, more doors open. People emerge wrapped in shawls, coats, scarves, caps, and layered improvisations. Some look determined, Some look offended. Some look as though they have been personally betrayed by the march. The storm has made everyone bulky, slow, and faintly ridiculous. This may be one reason communities survive disaster. It is hard to feel completely alone when all your neighbours resemble walking laundry piles. A doctor moves through the street with a black bag held high against the snow. He has accepted help from a boy who walks ahead, testing the path with a stick. The doctor's boots are wet and his face is drawn with fatigue. Illness does not pause for weather. Babies arrive, fevers rise, lungs tighten, accidents happen, and pain keeps appointments that trains do not. His bag swings slightly with each step. You smell carbolic soap faintly when he passes, mingled with wool and cold leather. He asks a worker whether the lane ahead is open. The worker shakes his head and points to another route through a yard. The doctor nods and turns without complaint. A profession built on urgency must learn detours. So must everyone else, eventually. At the edge of a square, a group of men attempts to clear streetcar tracks. They dig down until iron appears, dark and wet beneath the snow. The rails look surprisingly small after so much effort, as if the city's confidence had been hiding under a ribbon. Ice must be chopped away from grooves. Switches must be freed. Horses cannot pull cars where rails are buried, and passengers cannot resume ordinary impatience until the tracks reappear. You stand aside as a team drags a small plough-like scraper along part of the route. Her men push from behind, boots sliding. A horse pulls from the front, urged gently by its driver. The scraper gathers snow, then jams. Everyone stops. One man laughs, not because it is funny, but because laughter is warmer than despair and less expensive than brandy. They clear the jam and start again. The atmosphere becomes brighter but not warmer. Dawn reveals the scale of the work. Snowbanks tower along walls, chimneys smoke weakly in the wind, windows are crusted, signs hang crooked. A toppled crate sits half buried near a shop. A lamp post leans, wearing a white cap. The city looks both softened and battered, like a stern old teacher after an unexpected pillow fight. You hear church doors opening near the square. A caretaker shovels the steps, pausing to clear snow from the threshold. Churches may offer warmth, news, prayer, or simply a recognisable place to stand, and a bell sounds once, perhaps testing the rope, perhaps marking the hour. Its tone rolls through the grey morning, muffled but steady. Even tired neighbourhoods seem to lift their heads slightly when bells return. You keep walking through the narrow channels being carved across Boston. The snow walls on either side make each path feel like a temporary corridor. Faces appear at windows above, watching the labour below. Some offer advice, because spectators are rich in advice and poor in shovel blisters. A worker looks up and suggests, quite mildly, that advice might be improved by coming downstairs. The window closes. A woman carrying a basket of kindling slips catches herself against a railing and exhales sharply. A stranger steadies her elbow. She thanks him and continues, cheeks flushed with embarrassment and cold. The touch lasts only a moment, but such moments accumulate. They make a city feel less like buildings and more like a fabric, pulled tight in places, patched in others, still holding. By full grey morning, Boston is not restored. It is simply awake inside the damage. The workers have not defeated the storm. They have opened small passages through it, enough for doctors, milk, messages, coal, and stubborn human routine to begin moving again. The sound of shovels continues, steady and patient. Scrape, lift, throw, breathe, scrape, lift, throw, breathe. You pause at a cleared corner and look across the altered street. Lanterns fade as daylight grows. Chimney smoke rises in torn ribbons. Horses stamp beside wagons. Men lean on shovels for one breath, then return to work. Women sweep steps and call across the drift. Clerks unlock doors and children peer out, already imagining snow forts where adults see only labour. The city is tired, cold and half buried, yet its hands are moving. That is what dawn brings here. Not triumph, not comfort neatly restored. It brings effort, visible and shared. Across stoops, tracks, offices, stables, stations, and kitchens. You feel the cold through your boots and the ache in your shoulders, though you have barely worked at all. Around you, Boston begins the long task of making itself passable. One shovel stroke, one message, one delivery, and one careful step at a time. You stand among the shoveled paths and feel the storm becoming a story even while the snow remains. That is one of history's quiet tricks. Events begin as discomfort, fear, hunger, cold hands, and wet boots. Then slowly, people shape them into memory. A night of blocked doors and failed journeys becomes something retold beside stoves. Printed in columns, exaggerated at counters, and softened in family voices. Oh, the city is still buried, but language has already begun its work. People say they have never seen such snow. They say the drifts are higher than fences, higher than shoulders, higher than any decent weather should dare. They compare the storm with remembered winters, with childhood storms, with storms their grandparents claimed were worse because grandparents are legally required to improve the past. Snow invites measurement, but memory prefers drama. You walk along a narrow, cleared trench where the snow rises on both sides like white walls. The cut surface is layered and compacted, showing powder, crust, slush, soot, straw, and grey city dirt. The top glitters faintly when light touches it. Beneath, it is heavy and coarse. You brush one gloved hand along the wall and feel the cold packed firm under your palm. It is beautiful. It is also in the way. A man outside a shop tells his version to anyone willing to pause. He describes walking 3 blocks through snow so thick he could not see his own boots. This is almost believable, since his boots are currently hidden under a fresh crust. He says a streetcar vanished up to its windows. He says a horse refused to move until spoken to kindly. That part may be the truest thing he says. Nearby, a woman corrects without looking up from sweeping her step. The car did not vanish. She says it was only buried to the lower panels, only, in this case, is doing generous work. The man objects. She continues sweeping. Her broom makes a dry whisper across the packed snow. Memory is already being edited at the doorway, and the editor has cold hands. The blizzard of 1888 quickly entered American public memory as a landmark storm across the northeastern states. Newspapers, letters, diaries, photographs, and later recollections helped turn it into a symbol of nature, overwhelming modern confidence. Boston's experience joined a wider regional story, but local details gave it texture. People remembered particular streets, particular drifts, delayed trains, stranded relatives, and the strange hush of a city under snow. You pass a photographer arranging a bulky camera near a drifted street. Photography in this period demands patience, equipment, glass plates, and a personality willing to suffer for documentation. The photographer's assistant steadies the tripod while wind tugs at the cloth. A few men stand nearby, pretending not to pose while absolutely posing. History is being captured, and everyone would like their hat to cooperate. The camera points toward a streetcar half freed from its white prison. The scene will likely become evidence, souvenir, and spectacle at once. People may look at the image years from now and marvel at the snow. They may not smell the coal smoke, wet wool, horse breath, or frozen sewage mixed under the drifts. Images preserve shape better than discomfort. Discomfort must be carried by words, and words are often unreliable servants. A quirky tidbit about snowstorm memory is the popularity of strange drift photographs and printed postcards in later years. Enormous snowbanks, tunnels, buried trains, and people standing proudly beside absurd piles became visual trophies. The storm became something to prove. See, people could say it really was that high. Of course, they often chose the most dramatic drift available, because nobody frames a photograph of moderately inconvenient snow. You continue along the path and hear children testing the storm's new mythology. They are building a fort from blocks cut out of a snowbank, turning adult misery into architecture. One declares that the drift reaches the North Pole. Another insists it reaches heaven, which seems ambitious but charming. A third says it reaches the roof, which is measurable and therefore ignored. Children understand legend instinctively. Accuracy is less fun than conquest. Their mittens are wet and stiff. Their cheeks shine red. Their laughter rises cleanly in the cold air. A mother calls from a doorway that they must not tunnel too deeply. Her voice carries warning, shaped by affliction. Snow caves can collapse, and drifts hide hazards beneath their softness. The children answer yes, which may mean yes or simply we heard sound. Childhood is not famous for legal clarity. The air smells different now, less of fresh storm and more of aftermath. There is wet wood, ash, coal smoke, thawing manure, damp rope, and the faint sourness of buildings exhaling trapped cold. As paths open, the buried street begins to reveal what the snow concealed. Lost gloves, broken crate slats, a hat crushed flat, a newspaper melted into unreadable pulp. The city's memory includes debris, whether storytellers mention it or not. Historians still argue whether great disasters are remembered more accurately by official accounts or by ordinary personal recollections. Newspapers provide dates, reports, and broad patterns, yet they may exaggerate, simplify, or favour spectacle, circul. Diaries and family stories preserve emotional truth, but they can misremember time, distance, and detail. Between the printed column and the kitchen tale, the past keeps shifting underfoot like snow over cobbles. You notice a clerk carefully writing in a small notebook outside a warehouse. He records damage, delays, missing deliveries, and labour needed for clearing. His handwriting is neat despite the cold. The pencil point breaks once. He sharpens it with a knife and continues. This too is memory, though it wears no romance, records of loss, expense, and repair will outlive many jokes told beside stoves. A shopkeeper lifts a ruined box from the snow and studies it with a face full of arithmetic. The contents have soaked through. He shakes his head, not theatrically, only once. The loss is not grand enough for newspapers, but large enough for him. History often misses such moments because they do not announce themselves. Yet they matter. A damaged box can become a debt can shape a month. You pass a boarding house where people are gathered near the entrance, exchanging accounts of who returned, who stayed elsewhere, and who sent word by messenger. Names move through the group with visible weight. Relief comes in small exhalations. One man arrived after midnight. A cousin slept at a church hall. A daughter was kept overnight by her employer. A brother has not yet been heard from, but someone saw him near a station. Hope, like rumour, travels in fragments. The snow brightens under a pale sky, and the city looks almost clean from a distance. From close up, it is patched, stained, and tired. That difference matters. Many future retellings will make the storm beautiful, because whiteness has a talent for disguising labour. But you can still see the shovel blisters, the wet skirts, the frozen cuffs, the worried faces, and the coal dust embedded in snow near every working doorway. Memory softens hardship, partly because people need it to. A terrible night cannot remain terrible forever in every detail, or it would be too heavy to carry, so the mind folds it. It keeps the candlelight, the strange influence, the neighbour's knock, the impossible drift, the warm soup. It dims the fear, the hunger, the cold toes, and the hours of waiting. This is not dishonesty exactly. It is mercy with selective habits. At a street corner, an older resident describes another storm from decades past. His listeners are respectful, though not entirely convinced. He claims winters were harder then, people stronger, boots better, and children less inclined to complain. A young labourer nearby smiles into his scarf. Every generation believes it survived the authentic version of weather, while later generations merely experience damp inconvenience. This, too, is part of the historical record. Spiritually, if not statistically, you turn toward a quieter lane where the snow is still less disturbed. Here the atmosphere feels almost sacred. The drifts hold soft blue shadows. A single set of footprints crosses from one door to another. Icicles hang from eaves, clear at the tips and cloudy near the roof. A curtain moves in an upper window. Behind it, someone is watching the street become memory from the safety of a cold room. The touch of the air is sharp but calmer. Wind still moves along the buildings, though without its earlier fury. You hear water dripping from a gutter where heat escapes beneath the roofline. Each drop lands with a small dark mark in the snow. The thaw has not begun. Not truly, sir, but hints of change appear. Snow that seemed eternal already carries the first signs of leaving. A group of men near a station discusses train delays with the seriousness usually reserved for law, war, and the price of coal. One says the company should have anticipated more. Another says no company can reason with a storm of this size. A third says both things are true, which annoys everyone because balance is rarely satisfying in an argument. Their boots stand in slush while they debate the future of modern life. The storm's memory will feed public conversations about infrastructure, planning, wires, transportation, and urban dependence. People will ask how such a connected city became so isolated. They will criticize, defend, propose, and forget. Then remember again when weather misbehaves. Disasters often become teachers, but cities are inconsistent pupils. They take notes, lose them, and later claim they always intended improvement. You see a newspaper displayed in a window, damp around the edges but readable. The headlines are large, urgent, and pleased with themselves. Newspapers thrive on events that make ordinary people buy extra copies. The storm gives them delay, heroism, inconvenience, damage, and odd anecdotes. Somewhere, an editor is probably grateful and cold, a combination that produces energetic prose. People gather to read what has been printed, even though many already know the facts from living them. Print makes experience feel official, turns your frozen walk into part of a larger pattern. It places your street beside other towns, your inconvenience beside regional calamity, your neighbour's story beside statistics. The newspaper says you are not alone. It also says the headline writer had a splendid morning. A woman buys a copy and folds it under her shawl to keep it dry. She says she will save it. Perhaps she will place it in a drawer, where it will yellow slowly among letters, ribbons, receipts, and pressed flowers years later. Someone may unfold it carefully and say, "This was the great storm." The paper will smell of dust and age. The ink will have faded. The night will return in pieces. You begin to notice how objects gather memory. The shovel with a cracked handle, the chipped cup used through the long hours, the shawl dried twice by the stove, the lamp chimney cleaned of soot, the boot repaired after wet stitching failed. None of these objects will stand in a museum, probably, yet each has absorbed the storm through touch, use, and worry. A child may grow old and remember the night as wonder. A mother may remember it as fear. A worker may remember lost wages. A shopkeeper may remember spoiled goods. A policeman may remember doors dug open. A horse driver may remember the animal that refused or the one that tried too hard. One storm becomes many histories, depending on whose hands were coldest. You pass a small memorial of sorts, though nobody calls it that. A group has cleared the entrance of a house where an older man lives alone. They leave extra kindling by the door and a covered bowl on the step. Whose speeches are made. The bowl steams faintly under its cloth. Such gestures rarely enter official accounts, but they remain in neighbourhood memory, someone will say later. During that storm, they looked in on him. The phrase during that storm will become a key. It will unlock rooms in memory. You can almost hear future voices using it. During that storm, the rails vanished. During that storm, the baby was born. Or during that storm, we slept in the kitchen. During that storm, Nicole, your grandfather walked all the way home. The same words will hold fear, pride, humour, grief, and comfort. A date becomes a container, and people pour their lives into it. The cold presses through your coat as you stand beside a snowbank shining under weak daylight. Your fingers ache again. Your nose runs, because dignity has abandoned the weather completely around you. Boston is no longer only enduring the blizzard. It is beginning to interpret it. Every person you pass is carrying a version, polishing it, trimming it, defending it, or tucking it away for quieter years. The storm will live on because it stopped movement in a city built upon movement. It will be remembered because it revealed dependence beneath confidence. It will linger because candlelight looked beautiful against fear, because snow made streets strange, because voices carried through darkness, because work began before dawn, and because hardship shared becomes harder to forget. Memory gathers like ice along a roof edge, clear in places, clouded in others, dangerous if ignored. You walk on through the thawless brightness, listening to shovels, bells, voices, and distant wheels returning cautiously. Under your boots, the snow compacts with the soft, dull crunch. Around you, Boston's long winter night settles into story, not losing its cold, but gaining shape. The city will dig out, argue, laugh, mourn, improve a little, and remember a great deal. Beneath the white surface, the past is already freezing into legend. You emerge into a morning that seems made of pale glass, dim blue shadow, and tired golden light. Boston lies under snow so deep that the city appears newly carved, as if night has remade it from memory. Roofs are softened into white slopes. Chimneys breathe thin grey threads. Windows blink through frost. The air is still cold enough to bite, but the violence has loosened, leaving the world stunned and strangely quiet. You stand on a cleared doorstep and take in the changed street. Paths cut through the drifts and crooked lines, joining doorways, corners, shops, and stables like the first rough drawing of a city. Every path has a purpose. One leads to a pump, one leads toward the market, one leads to a house where someone is ill, one leads nowhere yet, because the digger was interrupted or sensibly went inside for tea. The snow gives off a brighter, clean glare that makes you narrow your eyes. Under the clean surface, you know the street is still itself, full of cobbles, rails, ash, mud, and all the ordinary substances polite snow has temporarily hidden. The smell's different now. It is cold chimney smoke, damp wood, coal dust, wet leather, horses, and a faint thawing sourness rising where the sun touches soiled piles. A man steps from a doorway carrying a shovel over his shoulder, moving with the stiff dignity of someone whose back has filed a complaint. He joins two others near a buried wagon, and together they clear around the wheels. Their shovels bite rhythmically into the compacted snow. Scrape. Lift. Toss. Pause. The work looks simple until you watch long enough to see the strain in wrists, shoulders, and breath. Across the street, a woman hangs damp mittens near a window where pale sunlight can reach them. Steam ghosts upward from the cloth. A child presses close beside her, pointing at the snowbanks with a solemn excitement. To the child, the city has become a kingdom of walls and caves. To the adult, it has become laundry, cold floors, blocked deliveries, and the question of supper. Both visions are accurate in their inconvenient ways. A streetcar stands partly freed from its snowy prison, its windows dulled by frost. Men clear the rails in front of it, chopping at ice lodged in the grooves. When iron finally shows through, dark and shining, someone gives a small satisfied sound. The track looks narrow and fragile beneath such effort. Modern life can feel very grand until it must be dug out with a hand shovel. A horse team waits nearby, harness jingling softly when the animals shift their weight. Their breath rises in steady white plumes. One horse noses at the snow, then lifts its head with disappointment, having discovered that the winter is not edible in any useful amount. The driver rubs the animal's neck and checks the straps with slow hands. Progress will return, but only by permission of muscle, footing, and weather. Boston's recovery from the Great Storm is not a sudden awakening. It is a sequence of small returns. A shop opens one shutter, a clerk unlocks a door, a baker sells loaves from a side entrance, a messenger finds a route across 2 yards, a train crew clears a switch, a telegraph line answers faintly, a ferry landing sends word that service may resume when the water allows. The city comes back unevenly, like feeling returning to cold fingers. You walk along a trench between high snow walls. The packed sides brush your coat, leaving white powder on the wool. The path bends around a drift too dense to cut quickly, then passes a cellar window almost entirely buried. Behind the glass, a dim lamp glows amber. Someone below has cleared a little opening for air and light. That small square of brightness feels brave, though it is only practical. The mainstream truth of this morning is plain. The storm has revealed how much Boston depends on connected systems, and how quickly those systems can fail. Rails, roads, ferries, wires, deliveries, horses, workers, and households all rely on one another. When snow interrupts one part, the effects travel through the whole city, yet the same connectedness helps recovery. Neighbours, labourers, officials, drivers, clerks, and families create paths where none existed. You pause near a market where people gather in cautious lines. The shopkeeper has opened only one door, because the other remains sealed by a drift. Inside, the air smells of onions, coffee, salt fish, molasses, flour, and kerosene. Customers speak quietly, not from politeness alone, but from shared fatigue. They ask what has arrived, what has not, what might come later, and whether credit can stretch another day. Coins clink on the counter, paper twists around sugar, beans are weighed. A woman buys less than she hoped and more than she can easily carry. The grocer makes notes in his ledger and does not press one customer too sharply. He knows the family, he knows the storm, he also knows his own bills, sitting somewhere with the patience of spiders. Mercy and arithmetic stand side by side, avoiding eye contact. A quirky little scene unfolds near the doorway, where a man tries to carry home a basket, a coal shovel, and a rescued hat at the same time. The hat is not his, apparently, but he believes the owner may be found through neighbourhood inquiry. He holds it up for inspection. Several people deny responsibility. One woman says it resembles her cousin's hat, but the cousin has terrible taste, so that proves nothing. The hat continues its uncertain civic journey. You move toward a broader street where the morning light catches windows and turns them silver. The snowbanks are high enough that pedestrians meet each other, like travellers in narrow ravines. Passing requires negotiation. One person turns sideways, another steps into a drift and regrets it immediately. A gentleman offers too many apologies while his umbrella sheds snow down someone else's sleeve. Civilization survives through manners, but only barely. At a schoolhouse, The door remains closed, though children have gathered nearby with great strategic interest. Lessons may be delayed, but snow engineering is underway. They build forts, dig passages, and throw soft clumps at targets agreed upon by no recognised authority. Their laughter rings against the cold walls. An adult warns them away from the streetcar tracks. They retreat briefly, then begin discussing whether the warning included the area beside the tracks. Legal interpretation begins early. The storm has made the city strange, but not empty. Every place holds activity suited to its need. At a stable, horses are brushed, fed, and checked for strain. At a firehouse, men clear doors and hydrants. At a telegraph office, clerks listen for signals returning along damaged lines. At churches, caretakers sweep steps and offer warmth to those still stranded. At homes, fires are rebuilt, bedding shaken, boots dried, and worry sorted into tasks. Historians still argue whether the blizzard should be remembered mainly as a crisis of technology or a portrait of community endurance. Some emphasise the collapse of modern systems, especially transport and communication. Others focus on social response, neighbourhood aid, and the intimate labour of households and workers. Both views belong here. You can see failed systems in the buried rails, and human endurance in every path cut through the snow. You approach a small square where a church bell begins to ring. The sound is clearer now, no longer smothered by flying snow. It moves over the rooftops and down the shovelled corridors, gentle but firm. People pause only briefly to hear it. A woman crosses herself. A man checks his watch. A boy tries to imitate the rhythm with a shovel handle against a post and is told not to improve the bell. The bell's tone settles over the morning like a reminder that time has continued. The storm interrupted schedules, but not the turning of hours. People will return to work where they can. Those who cannot will count losses, mend plans, and explain absence. Beds must be remade, streets must be cleared, coal must be delivered, news must be printed. The city resumes by accepting that nothing resumes all at once. Near a print shop, a frettsheet is posted in the head dock. People lean close to read, their breath fogging the glass. The words turn the private hardship into public record. Delays, damage, blocked routes, rescued travellers, stopped trains, and uncertain reports all stand in black type. A woman reads silently, then nods as if confirming what her body already knows. Print gives shape, but experience is already written deeply. You notice a man lifting snow from around a fire hydrant, marking it clearly with ash and broken wood. It is careful work, unglamorous and urgent. A buried hydrant can cost precious time during a fire. The storm, so cold and white, does not remove the danger of flame. In crowded neighbourhoods, every stove, lamp, and candle remains a risk. Winter does not replace one hazard with another. It stacks them, because apparently it has ambition. At the edge of the square, a doctor emerges from a doorway, his black bag in hand. He looks tired enough to sleep standing up, though that would alarm patients. A woman thanks him quietly from the step. He lifts his hat and moves on through the cut path. His boots are stained with slush. His coat is dusted with fresh snow sliding from roofs. Duty has made its rounds and will make more. You follow the path past houses where curtains open one by one. Each window reveals a different morning. A kitchen table with bowls, a bed pulled nearer the stove, a man repairing a boot, a woman combing a child's hair while the child twists to look outside, a servant carrying ashes, a boarder shaving in cold light with an expression of deep betrayal. Life returns not as spectacle, but as grooming, sweeping, eating, warming, and trying again. The atmosphere has softened. The wind remains, but it no longer owns every sound. You can hear the drip of melting snow from the sunlit roof edge. You can hear a wagon creak forward at last. You can hear a street vendor calling carefully, testing whether commerce has survived. You can hear neighbours greeting one another with voices hoarse from cold and conversation. Boston breathes, not easily, but audibly. You stop by a snowbank where the surface glitters under the low winter sun. Your glove sinks into it, and the cold presses through the fabric. The snow is real, heavy, and present. So are the paths through it. That is the quiet lesson of the morning. A city is not only its buildings, systems, or ambitions. It is the hands that clear entrances, the voices that answer calls, and the small lights kept alive when the wind is at its worst. The day opens slowly, lamps are extinguished, curtains are tied back, stoves are fed, and shovels continue their steady work. Somewhere, a train gives a faint whistle, uncertain but promising. Somewhere, a ferry bell answers across water. Somewhere, a newspaper boy lifts his voice again, because the world may be half buried, but news is apparently immune to discouragement. The white city begins to move under a pale sky. Now let the morning grow quieter around you. Let the sharp edges of the snow soften in your mind, and let the hard work of the city drift farther away. You are no longer required to follow every shovel stroke, every wheel rut, every worried account written in ink. The candle has burned low, but its little pool of light remains warm in memory. The stove holds a red heart beneath the ash. The kettle rests, no longer singing, only breathing a faint warmth into the room. Outside, the snowbanks shine under a gentle winter brightness. Footpaths curve between houses like pale ribbons. The bells have faded, the voices have lowered, the horses stand calm in their harness, and the windows glow with the small piece of people beginning again. You feel wool at your shoulders, warmth around your hands, and the steady floor beneath your feet. The storm has spent its great voice, leaving only the hush that follows. Let Boston sleep beneath its white covering now. Let the harbour settle into grey light. Let the rails wait patiently under the cleared ice. Let every candle, every lamp, every careful household flame become a star, low and human, shining against the cold. You breathe in slowly, you breathe out slowly. Snow rests on roofs, on railings, on silent steps. The night has passed into memory, and memory has become soft enough to hold.